We are live.
We are live. Okay, we are going to continue committee. We've got bills in here and I'm gonna try and get through them all. Mixed in with, we have probably 4 days because they're gonna want us to get a committee conference before May 10th. To fix the property tax and school funding system. So this is your recreation for today. We're gonna take up H10. And you've just gotten a copy. And Rick,
Yeah.
come on up. You are new to finance.
First time, yeah.
Yeah. You know everyone here?
Mostly, many that worked with you all.
Okay.
I can introduce myself first, or
Okay, well, I was gonna have the committee introduce themselves.
it'd be great too.
Okay, well, I know you know Senator Brock, so maybe we'll start with Senator Chittenden.
I'm Senator Chittenden from Chittenden County. I'm excited.
Okay, Senator from Orange. Mark.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself.
Senator from Warren. Nice to meet you. Senator from Warren. Mark McDowell.
You know me, Keisha, and my committee chairs are missing, which is normal, and last but not least.
Nick McCormick.
Nice to meet you.
Okay.
Mhm.
Keisha and Senator Gray will show up sometime. I assume they're out negotiating new amendments to the bill we passed out on Friday evening. So I don't know when we'll see those, if ever. So,
Well, Rick Sagel, Office Legislative Council. Nice to meet you all, see you all again. I started in October, but you haven't invited me, so I haven't had the pleasure of coming to Senate Finance. So I'm happy to be here. H10, you should have version 5.2. Madam Chair, I have an amendment too that has some typos, addressed typos that
we're
I
good
sent-
at fixing Scrivener's errors.
I sent to Zane, so I'm not sure if he has printed out those copies.
No, but it's posted in the page.
Okay.
Okay,
Walkthrough of H10, Madam Chair.
yes,
Okay.
that'd be great.
So, we're dealing with veggie and section 1 is just pushing out the sunset. Currently, it is set to sunset January 1st, 2025. This bill would push that back to January 1st, 2030, so 5 extra years. Section 2 addresses the Pepsi membership. So currently there are 11 members and the 11 members is not changing. What is changing is who appoints those 11. Currently the governor appoints 9 of the 11. That's being changed to 7 of the 11. The legislature currently gets 2, and through this legislation they would get 4, 2 appointed by the House and 2 appointed by the Senate. This part of the bill takes effect April 1st next year, because that's when some of the Pepsi members leave, their terms end. So that allows for some natural attrition, so no one's gonna be fired from Pepsi, useful. On page 3, there is the addition that if there's a vacancy on Pepsi, the council shall provide not less than 30 days notice to the appointing authority, and that appointing authority shall appoint a replacement not later than 90 days after the notice. Section 3 initially addresses the consultation with the executive branch state economist, that Pepsi shall consult with the state economist to perform the cost benefit analysis using the cost benefit model when considering an application for the veggie program, which is under subchapter 2 of this chapter. At this point, the bill starts to be amended to create this forgivable loan program.
Okay, that's what's new in this bill.
Right.
The state economist, if you might remember, 3 years ago, there was some issue with an award that was given, and then the person the award was given to made a statement in the press that could be interpreted that the board wasn't necessary. It turned out there was a state employee who had since retired that was running the cost benefit. So they gotta be, get me if I'm wrong, the state economist was, put in to run the cost benefit model, black box, in order to have some expertise looking at it. And this. Yeah. Okay, and we took out the requirement that it be at.
Okay.
Did economic development took out the requirement that the economists be at all executive sessions?
That's been taken out.
That's what I thought,
Yes.
okay.
Okay, and then the forgivable loan program, section 3330 at the bottom of page 3, and then on to page 4. You'll see some language changes. A lot of this initially is to make room for this additional incentive. So you see incentives plural because you have a new forgivable loan incentive for adding new payroll, new jobs, or new capital investments, and you have the but for it otherwise would not have without the incentive.
We've been told that forgivable loan is like a grant. But what was the provision before the notion of forgivable loans was come up with? How did that work? How did the system work?
So the system will work a direct cash grant, basically a payment over the course of years. So that's not being changed. That program still exists, and that is your traditional veggie program. What we're doing here is creating a forgivable loan kind of track that you can choose two options. You can choose either the direct cash payment, or you can choose the forgivable loan program.
And how do they differ?
I may let Betsy address those questions or Vita. Yeah.
One of the main reasons, as I remember, if we took it out, is that most of the traditional veggie goes to larger employers because they have the financial staff to meet all the reporting and financial requirements. This would be targeted to businesses under 50
Correct.
employees, which is something like 80% of the businesses in Vermont. There are smaller businesses that might like or need some assistance to grow, to put in new machinery, to expand and hire more people. And so that is the one difference I'm thinking. But again, you have to, and these would be loans through Vita.
Correct.
And I don't see Vita here today, so if there's any questions, we'll definitely get Vita in.
Okay.
So I've written to its purpose to send grants to entities that are often smaller that struggle to make applications up to the level of the larger businesses.
Right. This will help the smaller folks that are looking to expand mostly.
Yeah, you add new payroll or you make a capital investment. And those are the two ways to qualify for the forgivable loan. And you have to maintain your current payroll. That's something else required under this.
This is not startup businesses. This is not a startup.
I mean, it could be. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do. Yeah, you just have to meet the under 50 employees and meet the payroll requirements.
I have one question. This problem. There was a $365,000 loan default backup for Vita. It was an appropriation. The Appropriations Committee of the budget turned that $365,000 into a grant. And it had been limited to flood areas, flooded businesses. And so I don't know if there's money there as the backup for Vita, and we'll have to check on that. We'll have to talk to Vita. So, okay. Okay, we can keep going.
Okay. And you see here the form of incentives. I'm at B on line 4, page 4. Betsy may approve an incentive under the subchapter in the form of a direct cash payment. Senator McDonald, that's your current veggie program, or in the form of a forgivable loan from the VITA. We'll skip down to the definition section. And on page 5, line 10, we're creating the definition of an economically disadvantaged region. It means a labor market area in which the average annual unemployment rate is greater than the average annual unemployment rate for the state, or the average annual wage less than the average annual wage for the state.
Let me ask a question.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes,
How granular is area defined? Is that as small as a municipality or is that a county? Clean market area.
I can't answer that question. I think the reason that we're creating this definition is because that is a form of an enhanced incentive. That if you have an economically disadvantaged region, you can apply for through veggie, an enhanced incentive. The word area is nothing special here. So that would be a question as to is it a county, is it a town? I don't think it's clear. So that's something we need to.
As designated by the Vermont Department of Labor.
okay. I think this federal government should be that.
Okay.
They get a little strange sometimes, go in schools. Pick up,
This is language from VITA, so
yeah,
there must be a reason that
you will ask,
they want that clarified.
yeah, then you join into the same thing what we had, what we do, looking at rental rebate and miscellaneous tax, where Franklin, Randolph counties are in federal economic area. As Chittenden, economically, they're very different. So we sometimes do little carve outs.
Okay, we're on to page 6. Payroll performance requirements. Subdivision B. For purposes of the forgivable loan incentive, a qualifying business that maintains at minimum the same number of full-time employees on the payroll throughout the term of the loan agreement. That's your payroll performance requirement for the forgivable loan. 10, qualifying business shall only apply to forgivable loan applicants and means a business that has 50 or fewer full-time employees. Again, that just applies to the forgivable loan program. On to page 8.
I want to talk about page 6, and maybe it'll be a choice question for Joan, but we are listing all the requirements that they must meet. A qualifying job means a new permanent position that meets each of the following criteria. It's non-owner employee, 36 each week. Business provides compensation. Business provides position for at least three of the following. It's still healthcare benefits with 50% of the premium paid, dental assistance, paid vacation, paid holidays, childcare, other extraordinary employee benefits, retirement benefits, and other part-time off excluding paid sick days. I'm just wondering if a small business that's for a large business, so they've got a large pool of employees. I'm just wondering if that's realistic for somebody with 15 employees or 20 employees. Can they afford that? It's on page 6, and it's not new language, it's the existing veggie language.
And Madam Chair, I'm wondering if that language even applies to the forgivable loan. I may let,
Yeah, we'll let Joan talk to us.
because qualifying business was created for the forgivable loan. Qualifying job, as you said, already existed. And I don't know if that even applies to the small business.
We never
loan.
discussed that. We'll go finish the walkthrough.
Okay, yeah.
You're next. Okay,
Okay, page 8. application starting on page, line 10. Yes. A business may apply for a direct cash payment, which is your traditional veggie program. B, a forgivable loan incentive from the Vermont Economic Development Authority by submitting an application to the council in the format the council specifies, provided it is a qualifying business as defined previously. On page 9, starting on line 6. In a forgivable loan incentive application, the business shall be required to A, specify a payroll performance requirement, specify a jobs performance requirement, or a capital investment performance requirement, or both, and provide any other information the council requires to evaluate the application under the subchapter. The council shall not approve an application for veggie or the forgivable loan incentive unless. Go down to page 10, at the bottom of page 10. For the forgivable loan incentive, the Vermont Economic Development Authority, in coordination with the council and in accordance with the approval criteria set forth in this section, shall have the authority to review and approve an application for a forgivable loan incentive for a qualifying business. VEDA shall provide the underwriting and loan decision for an eligible application. VEDA shall establish loan loss reserves, which shall be supported by funds appropriated by the General Assembly for this purpose. A business denied a forgivable loan incentive may apply for other incentives administered by the council pursuant to the subchapter. Subsection D, a qualifying business is not eligible for a forgivable loan incentive if it has another incentive pending pursuant to the subchapter. Okay, the next section, we're just adding that subsection A there, we're adding forgivable loan as a potential incentive. No changes there really. Starting on line 19, changing the word growth to benefit to account for the new incentive program.
Okay, Joe, when you come up, I'm gonna need an explanation of revenue benefit. Okay, just when we're finished the walk. Okay.
Okay, on page 12, again, you have growth replaced by benefit in a few places. On subsections or subdivision 6 on line 19, calculate the amount of the annual installment payments. To calculate the amount of the annual installment payments, the council shall divide the value of the incentive by 3 instead of 5. Page 13, subsection B, the loan amount in terms of the forgivable loan incentive program. To determine the dollar amount for a forgivable loan incentive, the council shall A, multiply the number of full-time employees of a qualifying business by a maximum of $5,000 with a maximum total award of $200,000, and take the lesser of 20% of total capital investments made by the qualifying business, or $500,000. A qualifying business that is approved for a forgivable loan incentive and receives loan funds shall make monthly interest payments on the loan at a rate determined by VEDA during the loan term and pursuant to the loan agreement. The Department of Taxes shall verify the total amount of increase from base payroll and full-time employee count of the qualifying business during the loan term. VEDA shall verify the total amount of capital investment during the loan term. Page 14, the Department of Taxes shall not approve the forgiveness of a loan to a qualifying business pursuant to the subchapter unless it finds that at the end of the loan term, VEDA has verified that the qualifying business has made the required amount, if any, of capital investment agreed. And at the end of the loan term, the qualifying business has satisfied the payroll performance requirements pursuant to the subchapter and as agreed in the loan agreement. Upon verification that the requirements of the subsection are met, the Department of Taxes shall pay VEDA for the full amount of a loan that has been forgiven. Okay, small change to section 3 through 7, just clarifying that applies to the veggie direct cash incentive. No other changes there. In 3339, recapture and repayment. Subsection C, repayment of forgivable loan incentives. At the end of the loan term, upon verification by the Department of Taxes that the business has failed to meet the payroll performance requirement, the business shall repay VITA in an amount and manner established in the loan agreement. At the end of the loan term, upon verification by VITA that the business failed to make the required amount of capital investment, the business shall repay VITA in an amount and manner established in the loan agreement. And down to page 16, reporting. Couple of changes to the reporting departments.
I'm just wondering how. NAIC is the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. Or is-
That's a business code. It's like a
It's a-
tax.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I just didn't know how we got into insurance. And
I didn't know there's another acronym.
when
that had the exact same
NAIC
letters.
comes in
That's-
here, it normally is insurance commissioners. Okay, so
Yeah.
this is a tax code.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that's subdivision E on line 11.
Which page?
We are on page 16. So just requiring that the council include the NAICS code in its annual report.
Oops.
It's the tax code, that's all I know.
Industrial classification.
Joe wants to be able to explain how these all work. Or does.
I consider it tax. I know it's used for other purposes too, but
Yeah.
that's when I think of
But
it.
it is not, it is not the NAIC we usually see in this committee. Okay,
So. Whatever it is, I don't understand it, but.
okay. I don't understand it. either.
It's like categorization. If you're a business that makes software, it's your business is 37248. It's you have these six digit.
But it goes up to 6.
So the 6, yeah.
But
And it's a way to categorize your business as doing this type of work or this,
Okay. The tax code for the kind of work you do.
yeah, that's fine.
That helps.
3, we're adding the phrase for claims processed. The accurate information for claims that are processed by the council. Again, the qualifying jobs for each claim processed. The amount of new payroll and capital investment for each claim process. At the bottom of page 16, subdivision 2. Notwithstanding a provision of the section to the contrary, when reporting data and information pursuant to the section, the council and department shall take steps necessary to avoid disclosing any information that would enable the identification of an individual employee or the employee's compensation. On page 17, you have the one-time appropriation. That in fiscal year 2025, the General Assembly shall appropriate $350,000 from the general fund to VITA for the purpose of establishing loan loss reserves or the loan loss reserve for the forgivable loan program created in this act.
And that's where we have the problem.
Right. And subsection B, for fiscal year 2025, only a business in the state that incurred economic loss due to 2023 flooding events and is located in a Vermont county that was listed in President Biden's disaster declarations dated July 14th, 2023, October 6th, 2023. This should be or, that's one of my edits. I was typing this in committee, as you may remember. Or March 2nd, 2024, is eligible for the forgivable loan. And the other edit is changing track to incentive. There was a request from appropriations that it's confusing, that we call it incentives in one place and track in another. I'll show you the amendment, but that's the other one.
Yeah.
It is eligible for the forgivable loan track program created in this act. Such a business is still subject to the forgivable loan application criteria and other terms set forth in this act. Economic loss shall be confirmed by the Vermont Economic Progress Council. That's
Okay, you want to change track to what?
to incentive.
Incentive.
Yeah.
Okay. So. Folks had this. No,
They're aware of it.
they're aware of it, they reviewed it, because they also asked us to put in a 5-year sunset. Economic development was taking out a sunset. They did appropriate on the contingency. 350,000 as direct grants to flood impacted businesses, which is really what they need, because most of them are leveraged over the hill. So I don't know what we do with section 4. I'm gonna have Vita come in, but I'm pretty sure Vita's not gonna start making loans until they have the funds to back up any defaults. I'd be upset if they did, so we may have to play with if we decide to do this, we may have to look at the dates so that we have the chance to put 350 in, unless 350 is in the House budget. Do you know, Joan?
It's not.
It's not, okay, therefore it is not in play in the budget discussions. So we don't have a loan loss reserve funding at this point. Unless we could find a very discrete tax to raise, which I don't think we could. So that's where we are with that one. Do we have any drafting questions? Because I'm gonna have Joan and Joan. I don't know if you and Jessica have. And I don't think this committee has met Jessica. Okay. So are you coming up together? Are you coming up?
Yeah, we could do that. I think, what I was thinking about doing is, since this is really the first time this committee has heard this bill,
Yes.
is to start a little bit about the genesis of how we came up with this idea, so that it didn't just
Okay,
come out of
but
left field.
this may be your only chance
Yeah.
to get this bill out of here, because we start on the yield bill.
Yes.
So, I would take it, you want to come up, yeah, and you find a chair over.
Okay. John Bolton, Commissioner, Economic
Thank
Development.
you for giving me the comfy chair.
No problem. And, you know,
Yeah, so I'm Jessica Hartleben. I'm the executive director of the Vermont Economic Progress Council. I started in that position in January of this year. I have met Senator Brock. Senator Chittenden was a member of the MEPC Council, and I believe we had a couple of meetings, maybe 1 or 2 together. And obviously, Madam Chair, I've testified with you, so.
Okay, and Senator Hinsdale, you know. Senator Bray, I assume they're somewhere discussing the housing bill. Senator McDonald, do you want to introduce yourself?
Mark Donald from Orange County.
Yes.
I'm Dick McCormick. I represent Windsor County District.
Okay, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure.
Great.
Sure. As I said, I was appointed by the governor on January 1st of this year. Prior to that, I was the staff attorney at the Department for Economic Development from October of 21 until January this year. I worked primarily on the ARPA-related grant programs. So I worked on the CIP program, the Community Investment Program, the Community Recovery and Revitalization Program. Also worked on brownfields work, did a little bit with the SSBCI program and other various ARPA-related bills. So now that that has come to an end, this opportunity arose, and I'm grateful for that opportunity to continue learning about economic development and how we can continue to grow the economy here. But prior to the Department for Economic Development, I was at the Attorney General's office for about 4.5 to 5 years, and I worked in the Agency of Human Services, mostly doing trial litigation in the Brattleboro District, representing the Department for Children and Families, doing child abuse and sexual abuse cases, and often termination of parental rights cases. And then I've also been a small business owner. I had my own private practice for about 7.5 years in North Bennington, Vermont, and was a general practitioner with the exception of real estate and criminal defense. So I have a small business background as well, and I've been a practicing attorney since 2002 in Vermont. So
Welcome aboard.
Thank you
In a
so
different
much.
capacity.
yeah, it's really great. I am very much enjoying being in the executive branch side of the legal world, having been just in the judiciary for 20 years. So being in the legislative and the executive branches has really been a great experience. Yeah,
Let's hope you don't throw cold water on it in this community.
I don't think you can.
I know which was through an economic development.
It's okay.
Okay, so
Yeah, so I thought I would just talk a little bit about the genesis of the bill because we, we always look to improve the programs that we have and we do that informed by data. And so we had tax department full data about the W-2s that exist here in the state and about 71% of the W-2s issued are issued for less than $50,000. That's a horrible number when you think about that. Somebody earning $50,000 could very barely take care of themselves or their families or buy houses. 23% the W-2s were between 50,000 and 100,000 and 6% were over 100,000. So we were like, all right, the whole reason why Veggie exists is really about increasing jobs, but also these have to be well-paying jobs. And so Veggie already has built in many of the requirements that a good incentive program has. We had Guidehouse do some studies last year, and they did desk investigations of other programs, and pretty much Veggie checked all the boxes with the exception of upfront payment. The states that had an upfront payment did better in terms of job creation, job growth numbers. And we explored that idea before about upfront payment, and it really went nowhere. And I think it was in your committee, Senator, that somebody, I don't know who, one of the senators that no longer was working any longer said, well, do you underwrite? And we said, well, no, we don't, but VITA does. So we thought, let's bring in VITA and think about a forgivable loan. So they get the benefit of upfront money, but it's really a loan. And it gets forgiven only if they meet the targets. So all the other Veggie requirements would be required, with the exception that this option would only be available to businesses that are 50 or less. So it's to give the small business at least an opportunity. So to answer one of your first questions was, well, can the small business have all these benefits? We weren't intending on changing all of the other Veggie requirements. So it's really about meeting all those requirements, getting the option for upfront. Why? Because if you're a small business and you're growing, you probably need cash more than you need to wait a whole year or years down the road before you get your partial payments. So we went into the state house this year asking for a forgivable loan and a repeal of the sunset. Why? Because it feels like every year we're back defending the program, talking about the program. We look back, I think Jessica sent all the details of the annual report, over the years.
We have abundance.
You have an abundance of information about everything from its inception. It's created like $1 billion worth of capital investment, $500 million of new payroll, over 8,000 jobs. So it's doing something, right? So why is there a need for us to continually come back? And I think it went from a repeal of the sunset to 5 years in Senate Economic Development. And I think it was for that purpose of getting the 350. And now the 350 is not in the budget. So whether or not VITA wants to do anything,
We'll have.
without that, that's a different track. But I just wanted to give that sense of what we do and why we want to improve it.
Okay. And this is tax expenditure.
Yes.
The way it's paid is, because VITA is a banking institution, it has to get its money back. It borrows the money from Wall Street. that the tax department figures that these new employees or these enhanced wages has produced X amount of revenue to the tax department. It's a little gray. There's no actual accounting. It's an assumption. And then they will pay back Vita. With the loan is forgiven.
How do you do that?
They write them a check.
But if it's forgiven, sure.
No, the tax department, Vita is making a loan out of Vita's funds. If the loan is not forgiven because they don't meet their goals, then they owe the loan back. If the loan is forgiven, so they don't have to pay it back, then Vita has loaned $20,000 and it's short. It's a bank. It needs to be repaid, so the tax department will repay them.
Only if the applicant meets the job requirement and the capital investment requirement. Similar to the role tax plays right here, right now, with the current veggie program. They check to see, do they meet the payroll target, do they meet the headcount target? And then the check gets cut to the applicant. In this case, it would get cut to Vita since they lent the money.
So, yeah. So that's how that would work.
It sounds like a great program to definitely help the small businesses that can't take advantage of the veggie program. So it's when they're trying to grow and stay in Vermont, but with the money not being in the budget. And all I know is that the veggie program is critical to attract businesses, or at least have the conversation with businesses looking at Vermont. So I am hopeful that we at least get out the sections that extend the veggie sunset, because I think
Yes.
it starts a lot of important conversations with people thinking about investing in Vermont. Good jobs.
I think that is one must do in here. The new thing, and our job is to look at pact on the revenues of the state. This is tax revenue that won't be going to the general fund. I've got the auditor on my list of witnesses. He has some very strong feelings about this, that we need to hear them. And,
If I may,
Yeah.
one other thought on that. If the appropriation is not available this year, is there any possibility to at least have the policy schematic or the, idea of the program in there subject to funding? Of the loan process?
that would be the only way we can do it.
So we don't lose the
Yes,
work that's been done.
I don't know. Vita's gonna need that. I can't ask them to do it without a capital reserve.
One question, did the 350 appear in the waterfall list?
It appeared as a grant. So it's not there to back up the loan. It actually is going to be more, because we probably want to take out all the flood zones.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It was limited, and you remember the discussion, those businesses are leveraged to the hilt. They don't need, the word loan will just.
But I guess originally it was in the contingency and then it got Xed out because now it's in contingency as a $5 million
It's-
increase to be got.
So they put a bunch of things together through this and.
But right, if we can get rid of the flood language and then say subject to
To
appropriation for
the
loan.
appropriation for the necessary, because by next year, it might be a little more that they need depending on financial markets. We can do that if the committee would like. Right? Okay. You're easy in economic development. We'll have the auditor wait you. Okay. Any other questions? Send me down. Will you see if our next witnesses can come a little earlier?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
the qualifying jobs, I remember when this program started, it was, 1997 with the plastic factory out north of Burlington.
Oh, that was
It's
all
molded.
special, Husky,
Husky.
yeah, that was before my time, and, that was all kinds of a special deal. I don't think this started with
Not sure.
that.
I'm just looking at pages 6 and 7. I remember Husky was the definitions were written that had to be, certain pay and certain benefits, et cetera. And one of the first things Husky did, which was to change their policy where they no longer cleaned and maintained their own building, they hired it out to subcontractors. And same thing with maintenance of lawn mowing and plowing of the driveway were no longer performed by Husky. And once they eliminated all those jobs and put them out to independent contractors, the remaining jobs met the criteria. But so I was just looking at, you have to meet 3 of the following qualifications to be eligible for the qualifying job here on page 6. And there's a list of stuff like dental assistants. And I say dental assistants, how much? Paid vacation, how many days? Paid holidays, how many? Childcare, how many kids can you put in there? Other extra benefits such as retirement benefits, how much? Paid sick days, how many? And none of those criteria has any measurement to it.
So I can answer that question,
Sure.
Senator, in the, large amounts of materials that I provided to this committee, one of the, handouts is the qualifying job and wage threshold page, which, VEPSI has determined that for healthcare, the employer has to pay at least 50% of an employee's healthcare costs, or at least 50% of the employee's healthcare premium. Dental assistance, the employer pays a portion of the employee's dental costs or a portion of the employee's dental care premium insurance. Paid vacation, the employer pays wages or salary for vacation days. Paid holidays, the employer must pay the wages or salary for the scheduled holidays that are taken. I agree, it doesn't say specifically, but that individual business would have definitions of what they include for holidays. So every business has a different holiday schedule, so if it's a paid holiday for some and not for others, it would have to be included as part of this qualifying job to meet that requirement. In addition, there must be a contribution for childcare. The employer provides free on-site childcare or pays some portion of the employee childcare expenses directly as a reimbursement or through contribution to an employee assistance program. Again, those would be defined in their HR policy. And then in our 2023 report, which I thought I brought with me,
It's on that side.
it's on the website. It does actually break out the benefits and what those amounts are that are paid by the businesses in aggregate.
So, Madam Chair, there were no measurements of how many days vacation, whether the dental is just the uppers or not the lowers, which is a silly statement. They're undefined, but then you have to meet 3 of 6 or 7 items here that are undefined. And who decides whether they've met what's undefined?
The council would make those decisions.
Yeah, I think if they come in and say, well, I offer 2 days of vacation
Right.
a year. And I really need them to work over Christmas. And most weeks I'll give them 35 hours, but some weeks it might only be 10, they wouldn't qualify. You've got to let the board make decisions. So-
Based on some written criteria that is measurable, other than,
It would be part of the business's human resources policy.
so when you look at the criteria and you look at the human resources, how do you know which ones qualify for?
The business has to identify them as part of the application process, and then the council reviews that in looking at their, application, when they're deciding whether to make an initial award or a final
Yeah,
determination.
I'm gonna take one more shot at it here. The business has to identify what it means. The screening guidelines don't identify what it means.
No, not in the law, but if you read Vermont Employment Growth instead of qualified job, it's on our website.
So this is
It
written by
says
rule or?
probably, it's 35 hours a week, permanent, will be not seasonal, temporary contractor agency. Non-owner Vermont employee earning above the veggie wage threshold. Receiving employer-supported benefits, healthcare employer pays at least 50%. Dental assistance, employer pays a portion of employees' dental care costs. It is a misnomer to call dental insurance, because it isn't.
Your teeth still fall out.
That's right, they only do certain things. Paid vacation, employer provides wages or salary for vacation days, taken paid holiday. Employer provides wages or salary, childcare, provides fifth free on-site or pays for a portion of the employee's child. So
This is,
if you didn't get anything and now you're getting a portion, that's progress.
well, this is certainly has more detail than it
Yeah.
as a statute does. And we can, you know, we grumble about, it doesn't, it's not exact, it's fungible.
Yes.
You know, I wrote it out to myself as we were going through to look at certain pages and kind of catch up and look at them now. And didn't want to interrupt when they were being presented.
Okay. But we aren't gonna vote this out today. I'm gonna hear from you.
We're fortunate enough to have witnesses today who
Yes.
take time to be here.
If you also look at the Vermont Economic Progress Council's program report for 2023, the statute does require us to also provide a summary of the benefits that are offered, and it's located on page 59 of the annual report for 2023.
So one of the changes on page 12. How to calculate the annual installment payments. When you divide something by 3 instead of 5, you get a different number. Is this just a number of payments, or does it reduce the amount of the payments? Page 12, lines 2021.
Okay. The annual installment payments, that's what the business will pay, how many installments they get to pay you back.
Assuming they,
It doesn't touch the amount of the loan, it just says you're gonna pay it back in 3 payments rather than 5. If your loan doesn't get.
were they obliged to pay it back?
Yes. Why did you do that?
No, so I think, so this is, the current veggie, right? This calculation about annual installments, they take the net benefit that they're gonna pay out in the term of an incentive, and they divide by the number of years, and it's 5, it should be 5, because at one point we were playing with making this a 3-year incentive, but it should have been turned back. Yeah, it should have been turned back to
Okay, so
5.
this, it should be being kept the same.
Kept the same, thank you, that's.
Okay, you might wanna make sure Rick gets that
Yeah,
on
yeah,
his
yeah.
edits.
How would that
What do you,
sub-capital A be rephrased?
It would just say divide the value of the incentive by 5, and that's how it's done currently in the current veggie program.
We wouldn't change that.
okay. Our next set of witnesses are. We're not starting.
I will lean on my colleague, Ben, and look, we're finished here to help me understand stuff that's
So,
non-biased, speed on risk. So no fault to the witnesses who are well versed in such things.
We're happy to answer.
We'll say this is the first time I've seen some of these things written. Oh, I'm on the other committee. There was a lot of talk about the loan. And somehow it got limited to floods, but I think we now know we need to take out.
Go back to the prior language.
Yeah.
Before the flood map stuff.
That takes section, if we take out section 4. That takes out all the flood stuff, and then we just have to find. An effective date,
Right.
probably a year from July,
It could,
July 1st, 2025. This will probably is 2024. No, shall be in effect the same, 20, except section 2.
Except section 2, which is the council membership. Which
Oh,
we paid.
that's right, that's all right, so we need to make them all 2025. No,
no,
we need to make section 4.
the section with the sunset
Section
extension
3.
would have to be like.
Yeah,
July.
Passed,
so
yeah.
section 3 needs to be 2025. Okay, the section 3 needs to be July 2025. April 1st, 2020.
That's the membership one.
Okay,
Mhm.
and then July 1st, 2024,
For the remainder of the bill.
that's for the membership. No,
That would be for everything. For the repeal of the sunset would be July 1 of 2024. That's on that
oh,
portion
well,
of
the
the bill.
sunset is going back in 5 years,
Right.
so.
Yep.
I'm just, well, I'll let
Section-
Rick figure it out.
Yeah. Section 2 has April 1st of 2025. That's the membership.
Okay, so that's membership. July 1st of 24 is everything else.
Yeah.
But we need section 3 to be July 1st of 2025, or when loan reserve funds become available, whichever is.
Yeah.
Whichever is.
Later,
Right.
later, probably. I don't want us to get to 25 and find out they haven't put the money in.
Right.
So we'll figure out that wording. Okay.
Yeah, that should make it at least clear that this program for youth loan is a contingency plan,
Yes,
subject to the availability of funding.
of funding. We may just write that.
And its justification is that it provides something upfront. You don't have to go out and succeed without having got some upfront money and then fail.
Right.
You can get money upfront, still fail, but at least it reduces the chances.
And it's only eligible for businesses with 50 or fewer employees. So this is more of a small business.
And my understanding is though, that even despite the language, that VITA does a due diligence
Oh, yes,
to
right.
provide assurance that the business is going to be able to repay the loan necessary. It comes along rather than forgivable.
And we will have Vita in this. They were very clear. This would be done under their criteria. They have the right to refuse a loan. They. Yeah. You don't mess with the integrity of a banking institution. It's just too much at stake here, so. Vita is in the driver's seat.
So we could connect directly with Rick on the language change, or how do you want
Yeah, he can draft an amendment.
Okay.
He's got an amendment now. We've already, but he'll have an amendment. He's got some technical tweak. I think he took an and made or.
Yes.
And I think we can do the effective dates. We can strike section 4, which is the whole flood eligibility.
right?
And we'll find an effective date when loan reserve funds become
Available.
available. Okay.
And then the repeal would be 5 years. It would be, I'm sorry, the
Oh, it's
sunset would be
5 years, yes.
And that's already in there.
That's already in there. Yeah,
Okay.
it's really.
Well, no, it's struck out. 3 is in there. We need to strike 3 or erase 3. and
Correct.
The 5 back in.
Oh, we have a few changes.
It's struck. So, yeah, we just need to revert to former language. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having.
Okay. Let's, meeting our drafters, we've got. Which one did it?
Motion.
Recognize.
No. Oh, no, still. Recognize the students as, no, I'm looking for the other draft. The drafters, the one.
Cash, payment, incentive, is that the same thing as the, yeah, online?
And they owe it back unless they achieve what they said they're going to achieve.
Sometimes it's up new definitions for something that I already knew. And then I wonder, why did that?
When's the twice issue part?
The easy.
Headache, I'm just on page one. I had a headache and I'm already on, just on page one.
Before it says section.
But you guys are working next week. Yeah, well, so I guess I have to work.
That one. No. Okay. Right.
We officially have 87. I don't see it on the board.
Yes,
Where do you-
we got it Friday. So we cleaned out our other 2 big bills. And we now have about 4 days. So I'm hoping
You'll-
Yeah. get as much effort as we saw in this morning's vote in helping us to figure out, actually save the public school system, which is driving its own way. So,
Well, we.
Yeah.
That's something, and then walk us through it again. Early in this process.
yes. I will ask, remind me that we'll ask Kirby to walk us through Brigham. My notes. Senator McCormick, could you open the door so they know that you're waiting in the hall? Okay. Oh, there they are.
She just asked me to open it very safely.
We know you did that. We know you did that.
Power of the will. And so.
Okay, we're gonna get started, these items. Kirby, Julia, I don't know how you've got it planned or not.
However you like, Madam Chair, I believe that Beth St. James is also joining us at some point, but she's in appropriations.
I know, I have a note that she is very limited, we're working around her schedule. I know. No, I'm not planning on voting anything out. I don't think we'll get the deal done today.
Okay.
So I could walk through the tax parts and leave education policy to Beth for
Okay.
later then.
That would be helpful. I haven't seen the bill because it's been a work in progress. I've been briefed as recently as lunchtime. On what's in it. But I think we've got a couple problems we're seeking to look at. One is the December 1st letter with the 18% increase in education spending and caught everybody unawares. And it became our total focus. And the first thing we found out we had a problem with the 10% cap the House had put on, anticipating the normal 3 to 4% increase in spending. And that was to, kind of phase in the effects of 127, the waiting bill. Our total focus through January was on trying to rectify that situation. No, you couldn't increase your spending 15% and have your taxes capped at 10. That brings on bankruptcy rather quickly. So we did that and we tried to get that message out to schools, so schools knew. Since then, I believe 30 school budgets went down. Some of them have gone down twice. The second vote on Montpelier's budget is today. So someplace around 8 or 9 o'clock tonight, we'll know if it's gone down a second time. And has anybody gone down a third?
So Burlington's third vote is next Tuesday, it's coming Tuesday.
Okay, so it's gone down twice.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
the situation that you've described was what is unusual about it. It was
Yes.
different from the last couple of decades, was the Act 46 that called for a 10% limit.
oh, yes,
And had that not, I'm not saying that Act 46 was
Microphone, please.
misguided, it's what it was.
it was the waiting bill.
It was, what it was trying to do wasn't misguided. The way in which it tried to do it combined with economic circumstances surrounding the nation.
Right.
At the time it was done, certainly led to a different result on town meeting day
Yes.
than we've been used to for 20-some years under the current formula.
Normal school spending over time has been 3 to 4% a year.
Yep.
It was
Which is-
forecast at 18%.
Which is a distinct, I don't want to say problem, but something that has to be understood and accepted or not accepted.
And we can look at the reasons why. We know there were unprecedented increases in health care costs, which was The reason some of us in this committee were concerned about the bill last week and its impact on rates, which I understand, of course, to be going up another huge amount.
We got a healthcare problem.
We have a healthcare problem.
Which
And
continues year after year.
yes, and we have not found a solution. It probably needs to be a national solution, but until Americans are willing to pay the 50% that other nations pay for their free healthcare,
And other things.
and other things, but I'll bet you 40% of it is healthcare. We are gonna continue struggling with what we've got. We have, I think, though, we've suddenly increased the rate by 15%. And nobody's considering the 25% of our people are retirement age and on fixed income. My social security isn't going up 15% this year. We've set a new unaffordable rate. I would like,
And then as soon as that's when he gets put on there, or to get down
this-
15.
I think spending is down to 15. We'll hear from Julia.
Okay.
But it will knock 2 cents off the tax rate. Some of my towns were talking about a 30 to 40 cent increase before the first budget went down. 2 cents is not a lot. So we've got to get through this year. But I think what's happened is we've just reached the point where your average Vermonters love their schools, want to do the best they can for their kids, but they've reached the point where they're going to go hungry. I remember the elderly woman that told us in Montpelier that when we had the second or third highest property taxes in the state prior to Act 60, that every time she did a load of wash, she'd put a quarter aside so that she would be able to have the money saved up to pay her property taxes. Part of the problem with property taxes is they get paid in big lump sums, sometimes 2, sometimes 4 times a year, sometimes 1.
That was the years of the people taking out Christmas funds
Yes,
and not using them for Christmas.
Right.
Using them.
so I read a study last week that said 56% of Americans could not financially handle an unexpected $1,000 bill. We're hitting, I think, most Vermonters with an unexpected $1,000 bill this year. And I would like to find a way to bring it down this year. But I think there's also some proposals in here, I'm not sure any of us will agree with them, to try and solve the foundational problem, which as far as I can tell is we had to do special calculations to get a national number because our class, not classroom, class, 8th grade, are so low compared to the nation that we just can't be calculated in the same formula as they are. But we're paying teachers to teach less than 10 kids in many of our schools. So, and how we're gonna do this in 4, 5 days and go to committee of conference and be out of here in 10 or 11, what do we got, 11 days? I have no idea. And I think I've got a meeting with my local schools who are irate because we haven't done anything to help them tomorrow night. And we're gonna be working into the evenings, probably fairly late, just in order to get a handle on this. It has been suggested that we could strike everything other than the enactment date and send it back to the House and we'll do everything in committee of conference. I am not comfortable with that. I think we at least need to hear enough so we have a Senate position that the committee of conference can argue from. Otherwise,
Well, this is very late to your yield, though.
The yield bill,
Said police.
the yield bill is normally a function of school spending. It doesn't have to be crossover because we need to get enough budgets. This year, we didn't get enough budgets by crossover to be able to do any kind of a reliable yield. But as I said, we sent out miscellaneous tax looking like a Charlie Brown tree this year. And I think the yield bill is coming in as our Balsam Hill beautifully decorated bill.
Well, one of the things that I would raise, I know we have specified adjournment date. But I think if we go back to the public, say, well, we didn't have time to do it, so we did
Yeah.
something without thinking it through and without having a real plan. And you know, as I see it, I don't see a plan here. I'd be very concerned about doing that on the basis of a date that we established.
I have always said, when people say, we have goals we have to meet and we have time dates we have to meet, we set them, we can change them, and
We need to do this thoroughly.
we do. And we could kick some things into a study committee or something. We're also, this came after the budget was gone. So we're in a financial bind with having money to do anything with. But I think I would like to find a way, find out maybe 10 cents.
Well, one thing that, you know, we think about, we've been told all along that we're going to have a tremendous tax increase, and if we do something such as borrowing, which, you know, has been suggested, that that's going to have an effect on our bond ratings and will affect our borrowing costs forever. But the issue, as I understand it, with bond rating agencies also, is if we fail to do something, such as solve this problem for the long term, our bond ratings are going to be damaged anyway.
Right.
And so it's not that we do one or the other, we really need to do both, or at least set a structure and a plan for getting to the end result that we want. And we haven't, as I see, we haven't really designed that result yet.
We're gonna listen to this bill, we're gonna see what we think about it. I would like to find a way, but that's probably gonna mean raising some revenue for the short term. I'm not willing to risk bond rating, not when I'm sitting with a $328 million bill to do the urgent health and safety repairs in our schools. But we can bond for $328 million. And if we are going to do any kind of more kids in school, it's gonna take some construction, rehabilitation. We're gonna have to put some money. I think we're gonna have to spend money to save money and provide better education in the long run. I'm very concerned that we have a school opening in Montpelier, and after high school, kind of a prep school for kids with high math and science abilities whose schools were not able to provide them in the math and science classes that they needed. I have two in-laws, semi-retired, blue and gold scholarship winners. They all both had to take classes online that their school could not offer in order to meet the criteria to get into UVM. And that to me is failing. We failed those kids. And I don't think that just telling schools you have to cut.
So what's our first step forward, Madam Chair?
First up, we're gonna walk through what's proposed. But I want, there's a point at which just cutting impacts educational quality. We need to make sure that there is enough there to pay our teachers and to pay for the teachers we need to provide the education our kids deserve. So that's my spiel, and now we're gonna start wading through all of this.
Okay, great.
And we might bounce you if we get Beth for 10 minutes, and
Uh,
unless Ways and Means has got you, they're on the floor.
so no, it's Beth and I, you have both of us, when Beth is here, you have us both. And our sections are kind of intermingled as sort of a back and forth.
Okay,
So if you know, if I start, maybe I can just go for all of mine and then Beth can
okay.
take over and,
Hers.
yeah.
Okay, that would work.
So Kirby Keaton Legislative Council, we're walking through H 887 is passed by the House, which is the yield bill, but it also has a lot of education policy and tax policy added to it.
And the Ed committee is going to look at section 1, did they tell me? Or
That's
1
my
and
understanding.
2, which has the education policy.
So I skipped section 1 right here, but it's the Commission on the Future of Public Education. It was a report and a study that was drafted mostly by House Education. My understanding is the Senate Education also wants to review that, and that's a lot of the ed policy that's in the bill is in that section.
In that particular section, though, at policy, is there any mention in terms of where this should lead in terms of the cost of education?
I would defer to Beth, because she's gonna walk through that. And so you can learn the details
Is there
there.
any money attached to it?
Um,
I mean, I don't know how you set up a commission unless you put money attached to it.
You know,
We'll go to your
it's the
section.
normal per diem, it looks like.
Well, I'm just wondering, if it's in any budget.
Any staffing?
Yeah.
Much council?
It is in the budget? Okay, Lily says something's in the budget, so.
Yeah.
We can. Take her word for it for now.
I'd say that for Beth.
Okay.
She'll give you all the details.
Yeah, there's miscellaneous fiscal year one-time appropriations for this.
What's your schedule like?
I'm with you today.
Okay,
So we were getting started on the tax parts and then we can
Great.
switch over to ed policy after that.
would
Great.
it make more sense for Beth to start, since we're starting with ed policy?
It's your call.
As close as we can run this bill as it's written might be helpful, rather than jumping around.
Sure, like I said, it's intermingled, so you'll have to jump around no matter what,
Yeah.
unless you want us to both sit up here.
I think that would be the most effective.
Okay, I'll give it to you. See, yeah, I think you have to take your chair with you.
Yes.
Got it.
In that case, we'll go back to the top.
Okay.
Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel, and I'm sorry to join you late, and my understanding that we're just starting with section 1 walkthrough.
We are
Okay.
just getting, the chair has been pontificating.
Section 1 creates the Commission on the Future of Public Education. Do you want me to do a line by line or a high level?
Higher level.
Great. So I do think reading the creation would orient you all, so I am gonna read that line by line, and then we'll go higher level for the rest of it. So there is hereby created the Commission on the Future of Public Education in Vermont. The right to education is fundamental for the success of Vermont's children in a rapidly changing society and global marketplace, as well as for the state's own economic and social prosperity. The Commission shall study the provision of education in Vermont and make recommendations for a statewide vision for Vermont's public education system to ensure that all students are afforded substantially equal educational opportunities in an efficient, sustainable, and stable education system. The Commission shall also make recommendations for the strategic policy changes necessary to make Vermont's educational vision a reality for all Vermont students. So that is what this commission is charged with doing and looking at. The membership of the commission should, to the extent possible, represent the state's geographic, gender, racial, and ethnic diversity. And the first member of the commission is the Secretary of Education or designee. On page 2 now, the chair of the state board or designee, the tax commissioner or designee, 3 current members of the House, not all from the same political party, 2 current members of the Senate, not from the same political party.
Okay, we're already outnumbered by the House, so I'm putting a little red flag on that one.
2 representatives from the Vermont School Boards Association, 2 representatives from the Vermont Principals Association, 3 superintendents, 2 of whom need to have specific qualifications. 1 superintendent from a supervisory union that operates a CTE center, and 1 superintendent of an SU composed of at least 3 separate school districts. 2 representatives from the Vermont National Education Association. I'm on page 3 now. 1 representative from the Vermont Association of School Business Officials with experience in school construction projects. The chair of the Census-Based Funding Advisory Group created under Act 173. The executive director of the Vermont Rural Education Collaborative, 1 representative from the Vermont Independent Schools Association, And, almost all of those folks were a designee if they were the executive director or president. That was the commission. On page 3, line 10, there's going to be this language contemplates a steering group with 2 members of the commission appointed by the speaker, 1 member appointed by the committee of committees, and 2 members appointed by the governor, so for a total of 5 members to form this steering group to provide leadership to the commission, work with the consultant, who we will get to much later in the walkthrough.
And these are not the same people that are on the committee.
They are,
They are. the
yes,
same.
this is like the leadership team.
Okay,
So they're providing leadership to the commission. And then the commission itself, the steering group, may form subcommittees of the commission. So only folks in the membership category are involved here.
okay.
Subsection D at the very bottom of page 3, moving on to page 4. There's specific language in here regarding collaboration, the commission's collaboration, and what information they are supposed to review. So the commission is required to seek input and collaborate with key stakeholders as directed by the steering group, but at a minimum, they are required to consult with the Department of Mental Health, Department of Labor, President of UVM, Chancellor of the Vermont State Colleges Corporation, a representative from the Pre-Kindergarten Education Implementation Committee, the Office of Racial Equity, a representative with expertise in the community schools model in Vermont, and the Vermont Youth Council. The commission is also required to take into consideration existing educational laws and policy, including any legislative reports they deem relevant, as well as specific pieces of legislation to include Act 46, Act 173, Act 127, and Act 76, which is the child care bill from last year. I'm on the very bottom of page 4, going on to page 5, duties of the commission. Commission is required to study Vermont's public education system and make recommendations. The result of the commission's work shall be a recommendation for a statewide vision and then the policy changes to make that vision a reality. And then I'm just going to walk through there's 5 topics. I'm just going to walk through the topic name and then you can tell me if you want to dive deeper. So the first, before we get there, sorry, there is a public engagement piece. So the commission is required to conduct not fewer than 10 public meetings, and at least half of those meetings have to be held in different geographic regions of the state. They are required to publish a draft of its final recommendations on or before October 1st, 2025. Solicit public feedback and incorporate that feedback into its public recommendations. And then they have to append all of that public feedback to their final report to you all. The public feedback process has to include a minimum 30-day public comment period. And I'm on page 6, a public outreach plan that maximizes public engagement and includes notice of the availability of language assistance services when requested. Now, the policy considerations, there's 5 major topics. One of them is a catch-all that is just anything else the commission thinks is relevant. But the first large topic is governance, resources, and administration. The second large topic on page 7 is the physical size and footprint of the system. The third topic on page 8 is the role of public schools. The fourth topic on page 9 is the education fund. And then that 5th topic, as I already mentioned, is additional considerations, anything else the commission deems relevant to its work. Deliverables to you all are the following. I'm on the very bottom of page 9. So the first, they are required to submit to you all on or before September 15th of this year, a written work plan, which includes a communication plan to maximize public engagement. On the top of page 10, they're required to issue to you all a preliminary report with its preliminary findings and recommendations on or before December 15th of 2024, excuse me.
That's this is all, I suppose if we can do all this in 4 days, we can do the rest of it in 4 months.
Well, it's just preliminary. And that would include in short-term cost considerations for 2025 legislative session. And then the final report is due on or before December 1st, 2025. And then there is a requirement for proposed legislative language related to any recommendations for the education funding system. The Agency of Education is required to contract with an independent consultant to provide technical and legal assistance to the commission. And the Agency of Education will also provide the administrative assistance for the commission. And also the educational and financial data necessary to facilitate the work. And school boards are required to comply with requests from the agency in collecting that data. The Secretary of Education will call the first meeting to occur on or before July 15th of 2024 on page 11. The Speaker and the Pro Tem shall jointly select a commission chair. Majority of the membership shall constitute a quorum. All meetings will be conducted in accordance with Vermont's open meeting law, and the commission will cease to exist on December 31st, 2025. Members of the commission will be entitled to per diem compensation and reimbursement for not more than 30 meetings, and that money will go to AOE to distribute. And that is the Commission on the Future of Public Education in Vermont.
Is this money in the budget?
Section 1A
Yes.
is an amendment. So this is money with so there was $200,000 appropriated in last year's budget to AOE for the work of the school construction task force. My understanding is that money still sits with AOE. And so section 1A is amending the allowable use of that money to be for the Commission on the Future of Public Education.
So we appropriated $200,000 for the school construction task force and they did not use it.
Correct. I think they did not use a significant portion of it. I do not know how much.
Okay, I will. Okay, so we'll try to find out how much is there. But that's just for per diems, right?
And for the consultant.
And for the consultants. You think we can get consultant for 100,000?
I think that would be a question for the agency.
I will most certainly ask them. Okay. I know we have one consultant that's. Okay. So that's section 1. Okay, Kirby, you do section 2, is that
That's right.
okay?
Okay, section 2 are the yields. Section 2 for fiscal year 2025 sets the property dollar equivalent yield at $9,846.
What is it this year?
I'll refer to Julia.
What page are you on?
We're on
Well, page 12.
You know what it is this year?
Yeah, Julia Richter, JFO. This year for FY 24 is 15,443. However, I'll caution that it's not an apples to apples comparison because we'll recall that we have the Act 127 funding formula changes. So we are doing away with equalized pupils and now we have long-term weighted ADM. So we really can't compare last FY 24 yield to FY 25 yield.
Okay, so the weighted changes are reflected in that 9,000.
Right.
But when the schools go to do their budgets, the ones that gained under 127 are going to be much better. I mean, that's a significant drop in the yield.
Right, so the way that the yield overall functions is still the same. It's for that education, the homestead tax rate spending adjustment, right? We've got the spending per pupil.
Yeah.
Divided by the homestead yield. The change is, the reason that it's not an apples to apples comparison is under the prior pupil weighting formula, we had somewhere in the ballpark of 84,000 equalized pupils. So the weights were applied and it was brought back down. What's happening now with Act 127 is the weights are applied and then there's not that middle equalization ratio that's being applied. So the yield in turn needs to decrease to just make up for that, doing away with that ratio.
Okay, we will have you up here.
Sure.
And Kirby, I've had a request that someone could walk us through the requirements of the Brigham decision at some point. In fact,
That'll be me.
that's you. Can you walk us through that when we can get, okay? Because no matter what we do, that will be fine.
Unless you want to. But I already got a PowerPoint.
You've written a PowerPoint and you just volunteered, so it's two good reasons.
That sounds good. No, don't need to repeat the PowerPoint. Okay, so the yield is dropping, but by, I guess at some point, it would be helpful to know what's the impact on school budgets, and, you know, we'll wait till you get up, but I know the dropping yield has been something I've heard about, along with the CLA, and what was the other thing I got yelled at? This whole thing is causing a rift in my family.
I can certainly present the Ed Fund outlook after the walkthrough.
CLA. And the yields. Okay,
Okay, well, continuing with the yield numbers for fiscal year 25. So the income dollar equivalent yield will be $10,060. And the non-homestead property tax rate is $1.442 per $100 of equal education property value. There's also two other provisions added.
tax rate this year,
What's the non-homestead rate this year?
yeah,
Julie has the first.
So that's also, it's important to note that this is equalized, right? So this is pre-application of the CLA, so what people are seeing on their tax bills will differ by town. So the equalized non-homestead rate in FY 24 is $1.391. And again, I know the committee has heard me say this before, but comparing just the tax rate from one year to the next is not giving a full picture of the overall tax bill, because it's not factoring in changes in property
I
value.
think I see what we're going to do tomorrow. It's read that. Okay,
Okay, so there's a couple other provisions in here that are not always in the yield bill. The first one, in 4A on line 12 there, is that for this fiscal year, there's an increase in the tax credit that's given for the property tax credit by 14.97% for each claimant. So the tax credits would be increased more than normal for this year. And there's also a provision under that just clarifies that for the December 1 letter next year, that this 14.97% increase won't be factored into the December 1 letter.
Yes, question.
yes,
As far as you know, have we ever done that before where we've given an extra boost to the property tax credit? Is this a common practice for the yield bill?
I haven't been around long enough to know if this exact thing's been done.
I can never remember doing.
Do we know what the total cost of this is? For
Uh,
spending on this additional credit to the property tax credit?
we have an estimate, and unfortunately I have to defer to Julia once again for that number.
Julie's gonna spend a lot of time with it.
Yeah.
I think this is, because of the way the property tax credit is figured, it's figured on last year's bill. And last year's bill was 15% lower than this year. Last year, we're spending a whole lot more this year than we did last year. So you're not gonna income sensitize people. And I'm concerned about the folks on the lower end of that, the families making $50,000 or less are not gonna get sensitized based, next year they will. But this year, they're gonna get hit with a significant increase in their property tax because spending is gone up. And nobody can vote on their school budget and not expect if you vote to increase. But I think we've got schools that haven't increased or haven't increased anywhere near 15% that are also seeing some pretty significant cuts of Brigham and equalization, so there's some double whammies going on here.
So that's it for section 2. Sections 3 and 4. Section 3 adds some language to the definition of tangible personal property in the sales tax chapter. To allow pre-written software accessed remotely to be subject to sales tax expressly.
So this is the
That's the
cloud,
cloud tax. You were expecting a
one little
giant.
paragraph.
Yeah, there's different ways to draft this, but this version is the simplest, and it's also one that we received feedback from the Department of Taxes that they feel comfortable administering.
Okay,
And then section 4 repeals the session law that exists that prevents the state from applying sales tax to pre-written software access remotely. Because arguably, it was taxable already in Vermont, except for this piece of session law that precluded it from being taxed.
I think this was one of those midnight bargains to get the miscellaneous tax bill passed.
Back in 2015.
Yeah,
So that needs to be repealed in order to do the other part.
all right.
And then in section 5, we have another, so obviously those pieces of cloud tax were meant to be additional revenue for the education fund. That's why it's in this bill.
Right.
And the next piece is also additional revenue for the education fund, which is new revenue. It's a short-term rental surcharge of 1.5% on the rent of each occupancy in a short-term rental. A short-term rental is essentially defined as any kind of, something that's not a long-term rental, obviously, that's not for a month. But that takes place in an establishment that's not licensed through the Department of Health. That's the way it shakes out.
A traditional B&B, a motel, a hotel.
Those would not be paying this.
We are taking one section of short-term rentals
Mhm.
and increasing their taxes.
Clarify, would not be paying, so hotels and motels would not pay.
They would not be subject to this, and this is a tax on the customer, like the rooms tax, I mean. It's piggybacking off of the rooms tax, the way that it operates, it would be on the return.
You're
room tax,
raising
presumably,
the rooms and meals tax by 1.5%.
for those short-term rentals.
Rentals.
Yeah.
Meaning the ones that are advertised,
On platforms and,
well,
or not
they're in
necessarily.
Expedia,
Mhm.
it's pretty hard to go looking for a room and not have short-term rentals.
So that's the short-term rental surcharge. And of course, there's revenue estimates for these new
Yeah,
things
we'll get
that
those.
we'll get to. And then in section 6, or going to page 14. I can move this along here. We have the section of law that is the education fund. The reason why this is being changed is to add the short-term rental surcharge as a source of revenue for the education fund, but at the same time, I went ahead and added other revenue sources that exist in law that were not kept up and put into the.
Okay, so the land use change tax isn't present.
It's deposited in the ed fund already,
But
it
it's-
was just
okay.
never written here in the books. that's
Okay,
all.
and the uniform capacity tax revenue,
Mhm.
okay, good, cause it's the first time I've heard of that.
These are all things that tend to be, all these things that you see here, again, it's no change in the law, this is
Okay.
just to make the.
We're not
the
making any
statute.
more money doing
It
it.
just cleans it up, it's just clean up.
Okay,
But these things, if you notice, they're sort of things that are in lieu of property taxes in the first place, that's why that
That's
they're
right.
clean up in the ed fund.
Senator Robinson.
To clarify on the cloud tax. If this had not been exempted originally, if this had sort of, the cloud tax had taken place, fully. Would business to business transactions have been automatically left out, or, would that still be a deductible business expense either way?
I don't know about the last part, but business to
Okay.
business would have been taxable.
Business just.
So I'm trying to unpack your question though.
Yeah,
If in 2015, there had never been a provision for
Mhm.
including. From then, without anything other changes in the statute, it would have been up to the Department of Taxes to interpret the law to whether it applies.
okay,
And it stopped at the department would have interpreted the law to apply to pre-written software access remotely.
okay. Just
But
print
that's- but
software
that's a bit
access remotely when a business buys it from another entity.
Yeah, they would have been a taxpayer at the end of this. I'm not
Okay,
sure of any specific exemptions that would apply because of that. There's, for instance, there's a manufacturing exemption that is like business.
right. But
But-
we need to create the special.
But what qualifies as manufacturing under that exemption, which that exemption was actually changed in the last couple of years.
Right,
But under the current version of it, it has bookmaking and printing and other things, but so maybe those, but there would need to be a specific carve out if you're trying to say software development or something like that.
okay,
Or,
And we are, if anyone knows anyone that wants to talk about this, I'm trying to get them on tomorrow. And do this kind of as a discrete section of the bill.
Mhm.
So, I understand have a lot of people that wanna talk to us. I'm giving everybody 10 minutes. But we may be here a long time. And we will listen to that. But taxes are the business deduction, right? Can I thought you can deduct
state and local
taxes you
taxes.
pay on your equipment along with the cost. What businesses aren't.
I'm hesitant to give a universal
Right,
yes or no.
That is also true.
But yes,
Right.
But in
factors.
general,
Yes.
and if you could refine that for us. it would be helpful.
13 pages with the film tax cuts changed. Or sworn.
Yeah. But just, if you can check that for us, I don't.
Can I ask one more clarifying question on the cloud tech? I know too much, I was on the original cloud tech with study. The, the application of the tax is up to the tax department in terms of whether or not it consists of like shelf-ready software or has been modified to the specific use of the business.
Yes, customized software is not,
Okay,
if that's what you're getting at.
Okay.
If this-
We don't have to
That's
say
why, that's why pre-written software is the term,
Okay.
so any business that's ordering custom software. That's not subject to sales tax, that's because it's more like a service, I think is the policy reasoning there. It's more like you're asking them to put in labor to create something for you as opposed to buying a product.
right, right.
Okay.
And tax feels they can handle the difference between those.
They already are because pre-written software is taxable, it's just the access remotely part that is not currently taxable.
I go down to Best Buy and last time I got a card, so I could, with code, so I could download the software, you know, supposed to get a box. But since we originally looked at this bill, at which time I think 3 or 4 other states had done it. We were kind of newly inventing the wheel all on our own now. I think half the states have done it. So many of these businesses are used to this because if they're selling their software outside of the state, and I assume most of them are. They're already having to deal with it in other states, so it's, we can learn from the experience of other states. We're not breaking trail here.
I want to hear the testimony tomorrow to better inform my perspective, but questions I have raised have to do with what IT maintenance contract is with these cloud services, and if the providers are gonna have to distinguish between what is a pre-written software bundle and what is maintenance or monitoring, so that's a question I'm gonna have. And I also have seen some other documentation that not many, but a variety of states have adopted cloud taxes that don't necessarily apply to all three categories. So there's some that keep gas or infrastructure as a service as not taxable, because that really is arguably a core business to business type input for supporting their operations. And I did get some estimates from Ted as to what those would cost. It would reduce it by about 25%, so it'd be a $5 million reduction. But I think it's worth looking at what the other states have, because not everybody has adopted across the board all three categories of cloud taxes.
We will, at some point, we have nothing else to do. You can get a list of what some other states, if there's like clusters of how they treat this, and any experience, good, bad, and different, that's out there published. And yes, we can reduce this. That's less money we have to reduce property value. So we're gonna be doing trade-offs all year. I will say up front, I have some concerns about the 1.5 surcharge on one portion of the short-term rental, not on another. It's not within the same category. And I haven't heard any reason that they're costing us more. If I were being taxed, I'd be considering a lawsuit. Because if you're the same tax category and one group in that category is being treated differently from others. But that just means if we don't do that, we've got to raise some more money. And I think somewhere in here, I'm gonna ask the Department of Property Valuation probably to track tax sales. Because I'm concerned that if we can't get this property tax increase down, we're gonna see an increase in tax sales.
That's currently part of H 629, which is actually passed out of Senate now. There's a
thing on tax sales.
there's a study of tax sales, but one of the things to be studied, one of the items to be studied is who you would report, like data collection on taxes, what you're saying, including who it should be reported to, because it's unclear if the Department of Taxes is the right source, because they actually don't do anything to do with tax.
Yeah, well, I think just because we are seeing this, unless we can fix it, unprecedented increase in property taxes. My concern is that some people are not gonna be able to pay that and will end up in tax sale or selling. But we don't have anywhere for them to go right now. We have less than 1% vacancy rate in most places. And we have a homeless problem. The nation has a homeless problem. The nation has a housing shortage problem. But we are here to deal with ours, and our property tax is unique, and this kind of increase is unique. So we've got to deal with our uniqueness. So keep going.
I'm gonna hand it back over to Beth for the next parts.
Section 7, we are on page 15. Section 7 is a piece of session law requiring the Agency of Education to initiate rulemaking to update their district quality standards to initiate the rulemaking on or before January 1st, 2025, to include recommended reserve fund account standards. And they are required to consult with local school officials prior to initiating rulemaking.
If you could characterize the rationale for this, is there concern that some districts that might have benefited from the pupil weights maybe put aside too much in reserves? Is that what's justifying this language?
I can't speak to what's justifying this language. I think the conversation around this language did involve how much of the school budget is going into reserve accounts and what is best practices around that, and should there be guidance to school districts on that? And so I believe that is the hope that will come out of this rulemaking, is guidance to school districts on best practices related to reserve fund account budgeting.
Quick follow-up.
Mhm.
Do you know of any efforts already done while this was making its way through the House and summarizations of what was put aside in reserves and all the different local budgets passed that have passed?
I don't know if we have, do we have that? Is that data somewhere?
I think AOE has done some research into that data, and it would be best to have them in to talk about the caveat with that.
Michelle's been really working at, Michelle, right?
Nicole,
Nicole. Has been really working. You inherited some pretty big shoes to fill, plus she walked in to all of this with a 15% and what do we know and why don't we know it, and let's collect the data. So I know she's been working very hard. She has more data than I thought she might, and is still surveying schools to see. We'll have them in, see what the cost drivers are, what we can control, what we can't control. And I have invited, I hope they'll all come, school board superintendents and principals associations in tomorrow. So they can tell us, we've had them in before, but everybody was focused on their budgets last time, is what we were looking at. I'm hoping that we will get the same energy and organization that we saw in the Zoe Saunders matter towards solving what really is threatening the schools, which is just the weight of the cost. And we need help, and we need more money. We don't have more money right now. It'll be hard to find enough money to make this year's increase affordable. And then we'll just keep going up, but there just isn't a lot of money out there, and some of us have been through an economic downturn. Treasury bonds, I guess, are not selling as high as they thought. And when that happens, I'm told that you frequently have a recession within a year. And we need to have reserves to be taxing capacity depending on the situation to get us through. So, yeah, we've got a long way to go. Okay, finance data now, and
Section 8 is adding a new position to AOE. A education finance data analyst to support the field secretary and general assembly and their respective roles within the education finance system. There's a bit of legislative intent here rather than spell out the specific duties of this role.
Right.
Some legislative intent, hoping that this role will allow the agency to provide a wider range of accessible and transparent data to everyone. And then there's appropriation.
is the appropriation in the budget?
I don't know.
Okay. Because if it's not it's not that it's never been done to put money in the budget that isn't in either budget. But it is generally not done and generally frowned. So we'll have to find out what is in the budget. Or we'll just say this position will happen when the funds become available, similar to what we did in the last bill. Okay.
Who would know if it's in the budget?
Julia.
It's being discussed in committee of conference. It's on that contingency list.
Okay,
I'm not sure if they've closed out that section.
okay, so it's not in concrete yet,
Right, it's still being deliberated, last I heard.
and our contingency, it won't get funded unless more revenue comes in than the official forecast.
I just want to endorse this length. I feel like this is a very important thing to commit resources to. We need greater visibility as to how money is being spent. The agency that, and from the testimonies in the common charter of account, this is the role that could actually bring light to that, to have every community be able to see what money is being spent in our district. So I don't know how to advocate it, but I can very speak up, to say that this is all supported from my perspective.
Okay. Let's keep going.
Okay. Section 9 is an amendment in Title 16, the education title, to section 563, which is the powers of school boards. This is the statute that contains the language about school district budget ballot. And if you'll remember, this language, the requirement that a school board present the budget to voters by means of a ballot in the following form, was suspended and is currently suspended in Act 127. This section, there's another section that removes that suspension, but this section changes that language a little bit. So this is the language that a school district would have to put on the ballot for its budget. We're gonna start on line 2, page 17, keeping current law. Shall the voters of the school district approve the school board to expend blank amount of money, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year? And then we're gonna strike the rest of current law and add some new language to reflect updated terms after Act 127. It is essentially the same information that's being communicated to the voters. So blank district estimates that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in per pupil education spending of blank, which is blank percent higher or lower than per pupil education spending of the current year. And then section 10 repeals that suspension. And then you'll see in the effective date section that this language would not apply to budgets that are still being voted on for the fiscal year 2025 budget cycle. So it would be for fiscal year 2026 that this language would be required again.
25. Okay,
What is the difference though in terms of the information the voters get? The wording is different.
The wording is different, so there's been some term changes after 127, so for example, we no longer have equalized pupils. It's a more appropriate term would be per pupil education spending, and so it's essentially the same information, just worded differently.
and we hope that it will influence voters to vote the budgets up and down. I'll bet you we have done 50 different information on the ballot, in the voting booth, trying to help voters understand if their school is going up significantly or not. To date, I can't see that it's had any impact. And generally, people support their school budgets until the cost starts to hit their grocery budget. That's what we've seen this year, but I can't see that we change any amount of lines by putting things on the ballot, but we'll do it again. And it was on the ballot, but it's on there now, so the clerks just have to print one ballot. It doesn't hit the ones that are still in progress, so next year, all right.
At least we don't use the word equalized people anymore. It's not very reasonable for people, regular people to understand what is an equal.
For people, yes.
Your tax rate is based on per pupil spending. And this proposal on lines 8, 9, and 10 seek to make a comparison between one year and another But if the weighting formula showed up one year and the previous year it hadn't shown up, you're gonna have a comparison wouldn't be as useful. There's this language here. I imagine it's been thought through so that it doesn't provide a unique year's change that reflects weighting where the previous year didn't, or true.
No, yes, so this language would be applicable for fiscal year 2026 budgets. And the fiscal year 2025 budgets for the first year using the new people weights. So when this language takes effect, it will be comparing budgets, assuming you all make no further changes.
Right.
Budgets using the same
Use
calculation.
certain fruits to.
I'm trying to avoid the apples to oranges to apples, yes.
Okay.
However, as I remember, the 25 budget, because it was the first year of the phase-in, there was no impact this year on your tax rate. But did your pupils, per pupil spending, because if you lost 10 students, you've got 10 credit. So that I was told that 127 had no impact or minimal impact on your tax rate this year. But next year it will have 5% and it will have 5% for 4 or 5 years until it's all phased in. So I'm wondering if the per pupil spending it calculated straightens that out, because if you're phasing in a loss in revenue because you've lost students in the old formula, are how that's working in the per pupil spending, so that
So I'm going to ask my colleagues to jump in if I get this wrong, but I believe that the new weights, the new education funding formula using the new weights from Act 127 for the fiscal year 2025 tax rates absolutely does impact tax rates significantly.
okay, because that was not my understanding when we were in the midst of all that.
There was a cap at 5%. If you went over the 5%, there was the tax rate review board, that was all repealed.
Oh, yeah, no, I
in
know that
1850.
all got repealed.
Yeah.
But I thought that if you lost 10% of your taxing capacity, you got a 10-cent decrease
That
in
was
your tax rate.
Act 84 that
Yeah.
passed out earlier this year, yes. There's actually in this bill, there's a couple of changes to Act 84. But yeah, but the reason why Act 84 was necessary in a transition mechanism was necessary because it impacts tax
Right,
bills.
so that's, but it didn't impact the per pupil spending.
Yes, so
Okay.
because per pupil spending is
what
a
it
figure of your weighted pupils.
Okay,
It's gonna look different this year.
okay. Okay, that's helpful. It helped your tax rate, but your per pupil spending still went up or down. Okay. All right, so yes, you would have been picking up that this year and you'll be there next year.
All right. Okay, we're gonna move to section 11. The creation of the Education Fund Advisory Committee. So, again, high level, the Education Fund Advisory Committee is created to monitor Vermont's education financing system, conduct analyses, and perform the duties under subsection C. The membership of the committee is among page 18, the Commissioner of Taxes, Secretary of Education, Chair of the State Board of Education, 2 members of the public with expertise in education financing, 2 members of the public with appointed by the Speaker, 2 members of the public with expertise in education financing appointed by the Committee on Committees, one member of the public with expertise in education financing appointed by the governor, president of the Vermont Association of School Business Officials, one representative from the School Boards Association with expertise in education financing, one representative from the Superintendent's Association with experience in education financing, and one member from the Vermont National Education Association with expertise in education financing. The advisory committee, I'm on page 19, is charged with annually making recommendations to the General Assembly regarding updating the weights using the same methodology used to arrive at the weights enacted under Act 127. And those recommendations may include recalibration, recalculation, adding or eliminating weights, or any combination of those actions as necessary. Another recommendation would be changes to or the addition of new or elimination of existing categorical aid as necessary. Changes to income levels eligible for property tax credit, means to adjust the revenue sources for the education fund, means to improve equity, transparency, and efficiency in education funding statewide, the amount of the Ed Fund Stabilization Reserve, school district use of a fund account, of reserve fund accounts, and any other topic, factor, or issue the committee deems relevant. The committee is specifically required to review and recommend updated weights, categorical aid, and changes to the excess spending threshold to the General Assembly not less than every 3 years. And that change could include no changes if that's appropriate. And again, they need to be using the weighting model and methodology used to arrive at the weights under Act 127. This committee will have the administrative, technical, and legal assistance of the Department of Taxes and AOE. Commissioner of Taxes will call the first meeting to occur on or before July 15th, 2025. So this commission is not getting started, or committee is not getting started until next year. They select a chair from among their members, and majority constitutes a quorum. And then there is, members will be entitled to per diem and compensation for up to 4 meetings a year. And because this group is not getting started until next year, there is no appropriation for those per diems. We all have to remember to think about that next year. And then this Education Fund Advisory Committee has a sunset baked in. So this this section would be, section 11 would be repealed on July 1, 2034. So 10 years.
Okay, back to the tax side. So the next few sections of the bill deal with some changes to how the CLA is used. Not how it's calculated or anything like that, but how it's used and the math that goes into the system of determining rates. Before I get into the details of it, just I want to set the picture. There's a lot of math pieces here that the goal of it is to make it so that the tax rates that are pre-CLA, as in when districts are coming up with budgets and they're expecting a certain tax rate, but it's before the end of the CLA. This math makes it so that those rates are a lot closer to what most districts will get post CLA. Okay, so there's a lot of math here because I think the idea is that there's confusion and frustration about when the CLAs apply.
Yes.
So to get at that problem, it's an informational problem. There's not an intent to change the math for any of the calculations for rates or anything. But by applying a fair amount of math here, we can make those pre-CLA rates closer to the post-CLA rates. So with that, I'll get into, was there questions before I get into the words?
Okay. I don't know that, I'm looking at the committee. You want to get into deep math right now? Or would you rather keep moving through and we'll do this as a separate section?
Okay, I mean, I can keep it high level by just touching on
High
the thing.
level would be good. I think
Sure.
we get into complex math subjects.
So section 13 is actually, it's not. It is that to have the Secretary of Education in consultation with the Commissioner of Taxes to do some outreach to inform
We
school
don't have a
districts.
Secretary of Education.
Hmm?
What happens if we don't have a secretary?
There's
When this was
interim one,
written,
right?
we didn't have a secretary. Would be the interim?
Mhm.
Okay.
Even if there wasn't a nominee, it would have been Heather. Otherwise, yeah, right, like, so whoever's acting in that one.
Yes, whoever's acting, yes. I mean, let's be real here, whenever it says Commissioner of Taxes or Secretary of Education, it's the people who actually get things done, they're doing it in there, right? It's not the
Yes.
staff person,
I think you're right.
so,
You mean everybody doesn't do the work we assign them?
it's just, there's a lot of unnamed people who do all the work, I mean, I used to be one of the people, so I feel.
I know.
Personally.
Hmm.
I did a lot of things that Commissioner Tax probably got credit for, yeah. So anyway, so anyways, so yes, those folks will conduct outreach and to include how, there's gonna be a term we're gonna go over, it's the statewide adjustment. How those are calculated, or used to calculate tax rates. And how using the statewide adjustment differs from the previous method for calculating tax rates. So there's gonna be some outreach about the CLA changes, is the first thing. And so the next part is some of the definitions are changed in Title 32. That has to do with the education property tax spending adjustment, which is used to calculate the homestead rate. It will start to be multiplied by something called the statewide adjustment. There's a definition of statewide adjustment on page 22. I think I jumped ahead a little bit. The statewide adjustment, what that term means is it's the ratio of the aggregate education property tax grand list of all municipalities to the aggregate value of the equalized education property tax grand list of all municipalities. It's the statewide average CLA. Whatever the average CLA is for the whole state across all the districts or municipalities, not districts, municipalities in this case. That's what this statewide adjustment is. So by multiplying certain parts of this by the statewide average number,
Yeah.
you get math that brings everybody closer to the average. And so that when the CLA is applied later, they're not as far away from the average.
So it will help, well, this year the average was high, I would assume.
The average
But
is still
it-
off, it's not
Yeah.
100%,
No,
it's still.
But it would impact, it would help towns that have a high CLA
It would,
and not be about fast increases. It would hurt the towns that are below that.
so it doesn't help or hurt any towns,
It does.
but at least that's not the goal.
Well, that's what everyone says about the CLA.
What it does
general.
is for the towns that are hit hard by CLA, let's
Yeah.
just say there is a town that's hit really hard by the CLA.
Yeah.
By doing the math in advance like this, their pre-CLA tax rate they're expecting would be calculated differently and it would be closer to what that post-CLA number is gonna be. So it's not gonna be as much sticker shock, is basically the idea.
Okay,
So I think the key point is that, as I understand it, this is not actually gonna change what how the CLA currently implements and is applied. This is just cosmetic. And it's trying to make it more explainable for the voters with less surprises. My one concern is this is taking the most complex formula out there, trying to simplify it, and I just think it's gonna add another degree of complexity next year. I get why the House brought this forward, but I also think we could just as easily drop this, leaving the CLA so that the people that have been reading up on this year, understanding how this formula works, won't have to reorient themselves to this new statewide appraisal, having to recalibrate. So I'm not sold that we need this language. I think it's just trying to move deck chairs around on a Titanic, for lack of a better analogy. But I get why they put it in there. I'd be also comfortable dropping section 13 to 16.
I've had a significant number of emails that they say if we just froze the CLA, our property taxes would have been okay this year.
Of course.
Right.
So, there is definitely a misunderstanding. Because when you look at your tax bill and you voted a 1% increase, your tax bill is going up 5%. It's hard to understand, so I think this might be an effort I don't know. I want to go through this. I'm looking for some action items at some point.
I don't know if this counts, but I do think we should pull this out and understand it better and just look at one of those scenarios that this is what you currently see and this is how that would change, because I'm definitely struggling to see
Well,
how this unlocks like a whole new understanding, but I'm open to.
We're gonna go through all of these. But I want to get through Bill and then have some committee discussion. I would like to hear from we're ready to just say yes and write off in sections. I kind of doubt that. But we'll see where we go. So,
So the next thing that's not related to the CLA changes to the math and the CLA adjustments is on page 25. So the next area is 25, and there are a couple of places, this is still part of the CLA package, because there's a couple of provisions at the top of page 26 actually that just have the December 1 letter factor in the statewide adjustment, the statewide average CLA, right? But there's also a new provision added, the December 1 letter, subsection D, that would have the Department of Taxes include the range of per pupil spending between all districts in the December 1 letter. That's just more information that's put out there. And then also on page 26, we had we had mentioned Act 84 earlier, which was the transition mechanism that was passed earlier in this session. And it for the districts that lost taxing capacity with Act 127, there was a reduction in their homestead rates and that reduction was based proportionally on how much capacity was lost. The first change we see here in section 16 is to factor in the CLA change. So this would be something that would be effective July 1 next year when the other CLA changes. All of the CLA changes, by the way, are effective July 1 next year. Wouldn't be applied to anything this year for this fiscal year. But that's what the first change is here on section 16, is to just factor in the statewide adjustment to those reductions on the rates, because it would be necessary to get to the same place if we intended to do that. And then section 17 on page 27 is a couple of other changes, and now we're getting out of the CLA stuff with this entirely. And these are some changes to Act 84 also that addresses some things that were left out of Act 84, and that's what happens with these reductions in tax rates when there's mergers or dissolutions or withdrawals from school district. So the way that what this language does is, in the case of a merger, whatever benefit was going to happen out of Act 84, the higher benefit would apply in the case of a merger. And then in the case of a withdrawal, there's no benefit when the district splits off from one that had the benefit. And in the case of dissolution, there's no reduction for any of the resulting districts. So if there's, as you can see, there's some incentive there for merger and some disincentive for the other things when it comes to the Act 84 benefits. And then we have excess spending coming back next year.
Face, right?
Since it's so exciting, it's been gone. So excess spending will be coming back next year under the language at section 18. On page 28. There's some conforming language changes like per pupil spending instead of per equalized pupil. The excess spending threshold, as they say, is under this bill is 120 instead of 121 as
we get
current law.
121 from
I think it was 125 and was reduced to 123, then 121
Okay, so we're taking down another.
over time. We've had to, because of the changes to Act 127, you'll see that excess spending will be now anchored to a base at fiscal year 2025 instead of 2015, because I want to go ahead and Beth was resistant to it or reluctant to use it, but I won't be. It was apples and oranges. If we use 2015 under the old weighting system, so excess spending has to be 125, so it's using the new weighting system. And that's it for that part.
Okay,
Section 19 is the repeal of the suspension of the excess spending threshold or penalty, rather, or excess spending.
Man, I'm not following, and, oh, sorry, you said 19, I'm sorry, so I've got questions on 20, I don't know why we're striking all this language that is.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was about to do. So section 20 is, these are all the carve outs from excess spending that are in current law. Everything that's struck through were carve outs, types of spending that were not included in excess spending before it was suspended. So the House would like to start from scratch on the carve outs. Those are all, it's policy, I mean, it's policy stuff, so I think that, you know, Chair of Ways and Means or someone like that would be a better person to describe all the reasons, but in a nutshell, I think the impression was that these carve outs appeared over time as certain events happened and they were response to events. And so the thought was maybe a lot of them are not as necessary going forward. But then at the same time as taking out all those carve outs, you'll see that there was a new carve out that's added.
The carve out, I don't.
Only
When you say the carve out, I'm lost. Like,
It's like, so for excess spending, it's, well, I'll go back up to the definition. That's fine. So excess spending is your per pupil spending, right? Plus any amount that's required to be added from capital construction reserve, so that's in excess of 120% of the statewide average district per pupil spending.
so that's what it used to be.
So that's what it is. I mean, that's what it used to be, and that's what it's going to be if this, if this change takes place.
So how did it change?
So, but when you decide what is excess spending, though, like what goes into it, what types of spending counts. It says that it's education spending, but it's defined under 16 VSA 4001-6. And what we have down here is 4001-6 big B, which are the carve outs, all the things that don't count when you're determining what is excess spending. Does that make sense?
Yes, when you're calculating excess spending, there's certain things that are carved out and not counted.
They don't count towards your excess spending. And so this is resetting it back to 0 carve outs, but then like I said, adding a carve out, and the carve out that's added here is bonds approved by voters prior to July 1, 2024, or 4 bonds that are approved before January or July 1, 2024. Voter approved bond payments toward principal and interest are not included. So it's a carve out for bond payments against principal and interest, as long as your bond was approved prior to July 1, 2024.
I just want to flag, I'm concerned that this bill came out of the House so late that we used a sledgehammer, we may want to use a scalpel heel here, so I really want to understand what we're doing by removing all these carve outs and how it can negatively affect or have some unanticipated consequences, so I hope we take some more consideration before we just.
well, giving the school construction report that we've got. But I know there was also concerns when one school put up a proposal for an athletic facility which their bond payments then would have gone into the cost of education and would have been paid for in the tax rates by everybody. So they may be trying to get at that. We will ask the chair to come down and tell us what they were thinking.
Later, we may
But-
later.
Okay. Yeah, are we ready to, these are all. Oh, we've been busy.
The carve outs are a lot, I think 11.
Yeah,
Did they scrutinize each of these or they just quickly say, let's just get rid of all the carve outs?
I gave a presentation, broadly going over when each of those carve-outs was added. And they took some testimony on that.
I'm not questioning their process. I
Good
just
reason
don't know
every
the
year.
history of all these.
There, and I have that, I have another PowerPoint for you all, should you be interested, on, when those, each of those carve-outs was added, as well as the history of the budget language.
I would anticipate if you put in as a spending cap that the cost of health insurance, we might be asked to carve out because the schools don't have any control over them. Now that we've gone to a statewide contract.
I take it this also would impact what we just did last year with weighting and increasing tax capacity for,
Act 127,
yeah.
Act 127 suspended the excess spending.
No, I know it did, but now there are districts who have a different tax capacity based on the weighting and needs of their students. Would they then fall under that excess spending threshold of the average if they're, say, Winooski?
Well, they'll have a reduction from Act 84. Right. But I don't know specifically how many. Based off of Julia's presentation that I saw, there weren't a lot of districts that actually hit that spending. Or are projected,
We'll get there.
Okay.
but I'm sure, yeah, you'll see more from her.
This will be based, if I'm understanding it correctly, off the new long-term weighted averages, so it won't be this blip between the two shifts. So I think that your concern is.
I would imagine they thought of that, I can't picture it.
Okay.
Okay, section 21 on page 32 is a report ordered from the Commissioner of Taxes to recommend administrative and policy improvements for property tax credit claims, including the use of an asset declaration. The idea here is that the property tax credit claim form can be used to report potentially informational data on assets that people own. So I think the idea is to get them information about people who are income sensitized, whether they or actually have a lot of valuable assets, but their income is low.
I think you're gonna pick up an awful lot of tired people that own their homes. To the people we originally put this thing in for. Okay,
Sometimes it's the home itself. that-
well, the home, yes,
And when it becomes an asset of a certain size, we have declined to,
take it away.
no, we could not. We don't tax them on income because they have a big asset. When it's the house,
we
when it's the house.
We don't.
Oh, I don't love this study because we're asking them to do a lot on second home property transfer tax and then come back with recommendations on second home property tax. And
We
this
will
seems like a red herring to me, like I
We
don't
will
see
hear
us
from them.
doing any of the.
With the Senator was saying, it's, but there is often a disconnect between what some things do in this formula and why the policy was created that has them do certain things. And we look at the thing and we say, well, this is crazy, we gotta fix this. But we don't understand why it was created in the first place. And if we don't we do learn why it was created in the first place, perhaps fixing it would be different.
Okay, well, when we need to do that, if I don't catch it, will you remind
I
me?
will try that, Chair.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. We've got 2 pages and we will have committee discussion, but I'd like to finish the bill. So if you've got a question for either of the presenters, I'd like to have a chance for Julia to, at least if Julia's ready, can you give us just kind of what we're looking at and where we,
Oh, no.
okay. So I guess, are we with Kirby or Beth?
I think I have the last little bit here. The next couple of sections are Act 127 conforming amendments. Language that should have been updated at some point due to Act 127, and we're cleaning that up here. And the term that we're cleaning up is adjusted education spending is no longer, or adjusted education payment is no longer a term. We're using the term education spending payment. And so these are just some conforming amendments in Title 16. Again, you can see here, adjusted education payment is now education spending payment. The same in section 4026. And the same in section 4028. And then we get to the effective dates.
Okay. At this point, giving all the fanfare that this bill has had, feel like Peggy Lee, and is that all there is? It feels like everything has been reduced to a study. And the studies are so huge. I'm not sure we're gonna make any progress in dealing with the problem.
And the other question is, does the study contain all the materials necessary to ensure that it's achieving what we want? We heard a lot this morning about the vision. I don't see any vision here.
I don't either. Senator,
I would also add,
I'm sorry.
and again, great work by the House. I'm saying this is moving quickly. One opportunity for improvement I would put forward for section 1 study as well as that 10-year commission. I don't see the very important terms that I'm hearing constantly from voters, cost containment and having that balance against what we can afford for our education. The only place I see it is on short-term cost containment as one of the reports, but I'm not seeing all the 5 objectives of that one, balancing those needs against affordability and spending. So I would say if we went back through, including some of that, that's an important balance, so that when these very important, well-informed individuals read their charge, I want top of mind that they also need to weigh how much things cost and what our community members can absorb.
I think that to me is most.
And that's probably missing.
I mean, we can't get workers in this state. I'm getting complaints about post office not delivering in our rural towns because they can't get workers. Can't get workers because we don't have housing, and if you have housing, the cost in taxes is so high. Yeah. So I am disappointed that there's almost nothing for this year. I would like to narrow the study committees. Focus them and give them the resources they, or maybe just it. And give them one focused task to bring back to us, and we shall act on it. If we can. But there should be some statement that if they bring us back recommendations, we have every intention of going forward with that, unless it costs significantly more money. But that should be part of the charge.
So if I may, my concern is that as I read the charge of that section 1, Future Public Education Committee, I just see everything that they're gonna come forward is gonna be very expensive, and I don't see that balancing language about what we can afford relative to our our tax base.
Thank you. Speaking of Peggy Lee. Earlier in her career, she had a big hit called Manana.
Wow.
You going?
This is basically saying we're gonna take care of this next year. And, we often get sloppy in our usage. We use the word emergency to mean problem is real bad. So it's an emergency. Another aspect of actually being an emergency is that there's a time element. A heart attack is a time element. It's an emergency, because if you don't take care of it now, the guy's gonna die. Unlike, so this is an emergency. We came here in January. Looking at a prediction of 15 to 20% property tax increase, which is. We're all used to people complaining that the taxes are too high. That is a kind of tax. That it cannot be paid. There are people who will, lose their homes. Now, the Senate does not, money bills originate in the House. We just get to amend.
Fudging that happens.
Well, we fudge that, and historically, and going back to the 18th century, Americans have fudged that. But it is essentially a House function. I came here in January anticipating that when we left in May, we would have addressed this problem, and and now I am getting communications not from just frustrated citizens, but from supporters. And they use the word disappointed.
Who was the people?
I said, not just dissatisfied citizens, but supporters.
Oh,
People-
supporters.
people
I thought you
who
said
are-
sports.
No. People who have been happy with my work over the years, who are using the term disappointed. And I think we have disappointed. I think this is a disappointment. I would like to think that if nothing else, a moratorium on tax foreclosures
That is
might
something.
be in order, just a moratorium on tax foreclosures. If we're gonna take care of the problem in the future, then maybe the consequences of having failed to pay your property taxes should be put off into the future as well. And if this committee would add that to the bill. Otherwise, I don't know. Okay, what's that?
One concern I would have about that is whether I would encourage additional
Yeah,
non-payments of taxes. So careful about what we do.
oh, is there the word tax in here anywhere?
Word tax?
Yeah, is the word tax?
Sure.
Okay, we got our in.
One thing I would point out about that, not trying to kill it before it's off the ground or anything, but if tax sales can't happen, then that means the towns cannot collect taxes, but the town still has to pay the education fund, the education taxes.
Yeah, we get pushback from the towns, but, I think we probably should look at the tax for the foreclosure bill that we did. I think it put some limits on, you owe $200 on your taxes. They can't take your $200,000 house. So we'll check out that bill and find out what we did. And we may make some amendments. I'm not seeing.
Also, my suggestion was simply, all I said was
Yeah.
a moratorium. I did not describe what that moratorium
Right.
would look like or what it would involve. If we were to explore the possibility of a moratorium, we'd have to deal with those issues.
I don't see much of anything except the tax, which will provide relief this year. The cost of food has not come down. The cost of fuel has not come down. Cost of housing has not come down, however, as does this bill, it did at one point increase the tax on non-homestead property to buy down the income subsidized increase this year? No.
That's much.
Julia,
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay, Julia,
I mean,
could
it's
you
like
come up and
baked
give
into the deal.
it
sure.
2,000 for, what is this? Thank you, everybody.
No, I
Super.
had this, as I was retired, walking away with work unfinished. And I pity anyone who's going through the election, not having the face over and say.
Thanks.
Here you go.
Very
Well, but on the other hand, I don't feel particularly sad that I'm walking away in a blaze of glory. It's, I'm walking away, I'm thinking.
Yeah, well, we'll see if we can fix things. The other body tried. It looks like they weren't able to fix things in time. We have a lot less time, but we are the Senate.
Function well on that.
Okay, that's right. So we're going to see if we can't pull something out that will give us a bridge until, I mean, I think we know what some of the base problems are, and it's our size, and it's our school size. And I hate to spend a lot of time studying something, but we're gonna have to find a way to bring other people along. I know it will hurt communities to have their school closed. It's gonna hurt them to have their citizens lose their homes. And
Over the years, any initiative I've done that ended with a study, I felt that I had failed.
Yeah.
Like I was grateful to my colleagues for their personal affection. I wanted to give you that little booth prize. I've always interpreted a study as a booty prize.
we will see what we can salvage. So Julia, what are we looking at now if we do nothing? And what will we be looking at if we do everything in this bill?
Okay, sure, that's a big question. Again, I'm Julia Richter with JFO. There's two documents on the committee page under my name. There's an Ed Fund Outlook that represents the House passed construct of the yield bill, both reflecting the data that the House was working with, and then I've done some data updates. So what the box that you're all looking at, there's also a fiscal note that reflects the bill. Where would you like me to begin? Or do you want me to
I am not
answer any
finding
specific
anything
questions?
from you on the committee page. Do you have something, Julia?
Yes,
Okay. Is it up?
yes.
All right,
On my
then
screen,
I'm
yes.
going to have to refresh my page, which means I may lose.
If it's helpful, I can certainly share it on the screen.
That might be helpful, because then everybody can see it.
Of course. So would you like to start with the Ed Fund Outlook or with the fiscal note?
Let's start with the outlook
Okay,
and then the fiscal note.
okay. So. How's that?
You make it a little bigger. I can read it here.
That works for me.
So what we're looking at here is the Ed Fund Outlook. The committee is familiar with this document. We walked through it right throughout the course of the session. So what is on this outlook here is we've got FY 2024, which reflects the BAA, and then two columns. I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller so we can see the other two columns. Two columns here, which reflect H 887 as passed by the House, the yield bill. The reason there's two columns is because the House was working off a little bit of older data. There's been since the bill has passed, I've gotten updates and data from AOE. So the right column is showing the most up-to-date information with the House construct.
Okay,
Um,
so that's getting us down to a 7 cent increase.
yes, what I will also caution with interpreting the tax rate is it's not reflecting the overall the change in liability, right? It's only reflecting the change in tax rate, not the change in value. So a more inclusive picture is to consider the overall change in tax bills, because that's taking into
Yes.
account both the tax rate as well.
So
as
your
the
value has gone up significantly, plus your tax rate is going up 7 cents.
Mhm. So what we're seeing here, in lines C, D, and E, we see the yields and the rate that, Kirby and Beth just walked through in the yield bill. We're also seeing the average percentage bill change compared to the prior year. So the way to interpret this is in fiscal year 2025. Under this construct, the average homestead education property tax bill, the average income education tax bill is estimated to increase by 14.38%. The average non-homestead property tax bill is estimated to increase by about 18%. It's a little bit different than what the House voted out because of the changes in data from over the past week.
14, it's going to be 17.99. And homestead is,
So you're seeing that in line H right here. Where you see the average percentage bill change. You can see that in FY 24 from 23 to 24, it was an increase of 4.27%. And now we're looking at, under this construct and the best available data, what we're looking at and forecasting for FY 25.
Question, Madam Chair,
yes,
and that is, it's like the case of the man who drowned in a pool, the average depth of which was 2 feet. Do we have any sense of the range of these numbers that affect actual people?
It's a great question. I don't have anything off the top of my head. And it would really depend on a number of variables, right? So when we consider the overall homestead liability, we have to consider the household income, the homestead property, and the town that homestead is located in.
Well,
Same
we
for
see, for
non-homestead.
example, the damage that would be caused by someone who gets a 17% tax increase year over year. But it always concerns you that is there some town or some group of taxpayers who get a 40% increase or a 60% increase or a 1% increase?
I can come back to the committee and share what the range of that average increase would be. With the caveat that each situation is very distinct, right? When considering you have significant shifts in household income from one year to the next, and your property tax credit is on a lag from one year to the next. But I'll look into it and see what I can come back to.
CLA,
Right, and the homestead and income rates, of course, depend on your local per pupil spending as well as the statewide yield. So
so this year, if the average is 14.99 increase. And your school goes up 18. You're gonna see an additional percentage, right?
right, so it'll depend, it really will depend on the school district that you're located in, right? That school districts, so when thinking about the homestead and the income liability, it's going to depend on that school district's per pupil spending, which is that ed spending, so the budget minus offsetting revenues, anybody ed spending, divided by the district's long-term weighted ADM, which is significantly shift with Act 127 from one year to the next. So that's your numerator, and then that's all, the denominator is the statewide yield, right, which is sum or a function of everything that's happening in the ed fund. So all school district budgets and the performance of non-property revenue sources and other costs that are included in it.
I have a follow-up point on the one you just made, but I think you did it well enough. I'm really trying to understand line 1C. So this one-time property tax credit increase of 14.97%, 23.7 million, is that coming from the non-homestead rate increase to 17.99%? Is
Exactly.
that apples to apples? So raising it to 17.99 is raising that 23.7 million exactly?
Exactly, so based off of the construct, and the data that the House was working on.
Yeah.
So, so that's this middle column, that's a little gray up top. So what the House did was they said, okay, let's solve for a uniform average bill increase. So across homestead, income, and non-homestead. Forgetting about this line 1C for a sec. Okay, including short-term rental, including cloud tax, let's solve for a uniform average bill increase. So that gets to an average bill increase of 14.97%. Then they said, okay, we're gonna have this one-time property tax credit increase. That's gonna correspond with this uniform average bill increase. So the property tax credit is multiplied by 14.97%. So that's 23.7 million. But as you noted, that money needs to be raised somewhere because that's a tax credit. And so the way that those 23.7 in additional property tax credit costs, the way that money is raised is through increasing the non-homestead rate to 1,442, which would result in average bill increase for non-homestead of 17.99. So that's how that difference.
I am concerned that this is shielding people from feeling the impact of their votes while also only doing this one time. And so next year it's going to be even harder conversation.
And I'm concerned amongst that non-homestead rental units. And that kind of an increase in taxes, we're already seeing rents that are going up like $1,000 in 3 years. That's gonna push that up. I think most landlords are gonna absorb almost an 18% increase in their taxes.
I don't know if you want to elaborate on this, Chair. I feel like it came up in conversation, but I heard circumferentially that there has been an argument that our non-homestead properties have not been keeping track of the tax rate of our homestead properties. And if anything, this was a recalibration to resync them. Am I making any, is that an argument that was used by the House Ways and Means?
I know business properties in general, especially downtown properties, are decreasing.
Further justification for this non-homestead rate
Yes.
increment?
I would defer to a member of Ways and Means to justify the policy choice.
Thank you. Staff doesn't have to just.
Sure. Good, maybe there's a document or PowerPoint out there somewhere.
I will say that it is true, getting at part of your question, with no value judgment attached to it. It is true that under this construct, there are about a quarter of towns that would see a homestead tax rate that would be greater than a non-homestead tax rate under this construct that we're looking
Do you know,
because of how the yields and the non-homestead rate have been set.
well, in general, when we did it, Act 68, whatever, we said the non-homestead, we made them not dependent on the school budgets because they didn't get to vote. They complained. The non-homestead was higher. And they were supposed, but we knew, however, that at some point they were gonna cross. Do we know in how many towns, leaving out all of this, the non-homestead rate is lower than the homestead?
So I don't know in fiscal year 24,
Okay.
in fiscal year 25, under this construct. 66 towns would have a non-homestead rate lower than a homestead rate. I will also note that not a non-homestead rate lower than a homestead rate does not necessarily mean that the overall tax bill.
Right.
Is going to be lower for the non-homestead, because homestead households can pay on income. Can pay on property or some combination of the two.
I just know that it causes some grading in towns with a lot of second homes. That those second homes have a lower tax rate than full-time residents. I'm just wondering, when we did it, we said, well, we'll fix it when it crosses.
We rejected at the time saying to compute the average of rate statewide for homesteads. And then apply that average rate to non-homestead property. That was one of the proposed solutions. And we did what you just said, we'll fix that later, is what we
And
said.
I'm just wondering how expensive and disruptive it would be to reset those rates. Terribly, right?
Well, it would really be a policy choice. I haven't done that modeling. I certainly can do that modeling. The question is. For instance, under this construct, you've got about a quarter of towns that would have a homestead rate higher. So that means that 3/4 of towns would have a homestead rate lower than non-homestead under this.
But that's
If you were
this
to-
construct. If we
Yes.
don't do this, what is it right now? I have.
In fiscal year 24? Or
Yeah.
with this data, but
No,
it's a
in
modeling
this year,
exercise?
in 24. How many towns? Do you know that?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can certainly.
Because that would be not, that would be helpful to know how much progress we're making, if any, if we've got 60 now and we're going to 66. But basically, we are subsidizing the income sensitized rate, right? By increasing the rate on non-homestead property, because it doesn't reflect this year's increase.
My concern is this is only helping income sensitized property homeowners. This is hurting renters, which are, in my experience, on average, are gonna skew towards even lower income. So I get why the House did it. I'm worried that this is perpetuating further insulation from the consequences of the spending approved at the local level. And I'm not sure it's the right move to subsidize the income tax credit, property tax credit system we currently have with an increase in non-homestead rate.
And I'm sure I did hear from my flooding impacted businesses. And we've got them in several towns, in those major flooding businesses. So, all right. That's what we're looking at. No silver bullet, huh?
Should use some beverage tax.
These
Are we looking at sales tax? That's all I wanna know is, like, are we open to that conversation to relieve the?
I don't think we are open to anything. I'm more concerned about the sweetened beverages, which actually do harm the one's body.
Put them all together.
We'll put them all together, we'll tax it. Okay, we'll probably sort as much, and I know economic development wants to meet in a couple minutes.
No, that meeting's not big.
No, money chair.
Oh, money choice.
It's not money chair.
Yeah, economic development.
Keisha.
No economic development, no chairs chair.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's no economic
No,
development tonight?
there's not.
No, I
Then
said
we
we
can
tax.
keep going.
So
But
still
not having the time to do text.
Yeah, it's okay, just,
Okay,
it'll explain more.
so,
Yeah, I'll.
okay. We So that's what we've got. We've got a study committee on the future of education. We have an advisory committee, which is long-term temporary, 136, to advise on things. We've got a study committee on the future of education. We are putting the excess spending threshold back in, and we're taking out all of the exceptions to the spending threshold, which we will start, I'm sure, putting back in, once schools understand what that will mean, like construction costs. And what are we doing at the end of this? We're taxing non-homestead businesses and apartments. So we're doing the cloud tax. What would the short-term rental impact surcharge? You know offhand how much that would raise?
The estimate is that it would generate approximately 6.5 million for the ed fund in FY 25. But recall that it's being fully dedicated to the ed fund, so that 6.5 is representing all revenues.
Normally we only get half of the percentage,
1 quarter.
1/4.
So you can see it booked here,
Okay,
being assumed.
so we're doing that. I would like to get a legal opinion. Kirby, I don't know if there's one that can do it about. I'm uncomfortable with separating out one section of short-term rentals and treating them differently, but. I suppose if there's no law against it, we can do it. Advisory.
Can I ask another
Yeah.
bothersome question for me? Is surcharge defined differently somehow than tax? Because I feel like it's being thrown around a lot, like it's not a long-term thing or it's, just slapped on top of everything. Like, I don't know what they mean by surcharge. Do you have a definition?
Kirby Keaton, Legislative Council, I mean, surcharge tends to be used for specific limited number of things, like a surcharge on a particular item. It's a surcharge in addition to other taxes. I think that's part of why that term is used for, because this is a charge that's in addition to rooms tax, so to identify that's what's going on there. Like the clean water surcharge is something that's in addition to property transfer tax. That's it. As far as to get to the chair's question, I am not aware of any reason for any legal concern about having a surcharge on short-term rentals as opposed to all rooms. I mean,
Well, no, all other short-term rentals, we're leaving out hotels, motels, regular B and Bs, and some of those B and Bs advertise as short-term rentals. Hotel,
so there's differences and it's defined what those differences are. I mean, this power to tax is broad, and choosing what you want to tax over other, what you want to favor over other things is something that's generally within your discretion to do. If there is a discriminatory type tax, I mean, you run into issues, treating certain citizens different than other citizens, or, treating Vermonters better than people outside of Vermont, and
couldn't say we're gonna do short-term rentals, but not for Vermonters that rent out a room in their residence. Would that be discriminatory?
discriminatory, like Commerce Clause type thing could be like if you said, if you are a resident of another state, you need to pay 100% tax on short-term rentals, but if you are a resident of Vermont, you don't need to pay. That would be a discriminatory type thing that would run into federal law issues, constitutional issues.
You get homestead exemptions for residents of Florida, but you don't get a homestead exemption for non-residents who own property in Florida.
So the, you're giving me an example. Yeah,
That exists in Florida.
And the rationale that the courts use is that homeownership is an encouraged, a legally encouraged policy. And that's one way to do it, that that the courts have recognized is okay.
I mean, that's in Vermont, we have the homestead rates where it's feasible that you'll pay less if you're using that residence as a homestead, which by just default, you have to be a Vermont resident in order for it to be your homestead. And whereas you have other people who have property, it's not their homestead because they live in Florida most of the time. And they're paying the non-homestead rate, and so we do have different rates, but yeah, the point of it's not discrimination, the point of it is.
You are a resident, you are paying taxes here. And if you are a non-resident, you are not.
So that's an indirect thing, so that doesn't get to the point of having, of being a problem.
And I think Kirby is correct in part, because if a Florida person bought a single family home and put it on the market for rent, and a Vermonter bought another single family home and put it on the market for rent. In both cases, the rent would have to be, they would have to be treated equally. You couldn't say that the Vermonter that bought a house has a better deal than an out-of-stater that bought a house that was not their residential house. And that's
Are there,
a rule that would be inappropriate discrimination.
can you help
Yeah.
us look at evidence of municipalities or counties or states that specifically tax short-term rentals? And I mean, I don't know, I do feel like it's a challenging definition. You have extended stay suites that look more like hotels, but you can stay for like 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, I don't know, I don't know who's in the middle.
So as far as what other places do, there's not a lot. Massachusetts allows municipalities to have a local
Right.
on short-term rentals. I think that there's some additional qualifiers there,
Yeah.
by the way, that have to do with basically going towards the commercial ones as opposed to just a person. So that's Massachusetts, and there might be some other things out there, but that's the one that's the most known for me. So it's not done a lot, but it is done. It's something that's done. There's a surcharge on short-term rentals in Massachusetts. Not most municipalities have not taken it up, but a lot have.
I would feel better if we might look, and again. There are commercial groups that are buying up properties and putting them on the market. They are not living in them. I rented a house for one of them. They're an organized group. To me, that is a commercial business. There's an essential difference between that and someone who owns a property here, who lives in it part of the year, who lives in it all year and rents out the room over the garage during foliage or ski season or whenever. And I have trouble with the rooms and meals. Differentiating there, I'd rather look at a surcharge on property taxes. Which I'd raise more money before looking at.
But I share your concern on that. My impression is those companies that are buying up these houses for short-term rentals, especially in more tourist contracted locations, are taking roofs off of the market from Vermonters that need them while not meeting the same safety standards that our hotels and motels are meeting. So I'm gonna get some emails. I'm generally comfortable with this, and I feel even more comfortable if there was a carve out for owner occupied parcels. So if you live on that parcel and you rent out piece, if we can do it, if the tax department can do it, to avoid the 1.5%. Because if you're doing this to help pay your property tax is, carving out that space above the garage.
Well, you won't be.
I say give them a break, but if they're a company owning multiple houses that are no longer available for Vermonters to live in, I'm ready to tax them even more than 1.5%. Bring on that, else, apologies.
I mean, to me, this goes back to data that we've started to look at in housing and economic development. That says there are probably 5 or so communities where short-term rentals are taking units away from people. The stows, the ski areas where you have almost unlimited demand in certain seasons for those short-term rentals. In my view, this is just me speaking, the best way for those 5 communities to handle that is to implement regulations that protect some of that housing, like Burlington and Ripton have done with a 30-day minimum. If you tell every community that they can't do this, you have a lot of people who have an ancillary property, you know, or have a literal cottage industry doing this, who we are impacting more than Hampton Inn for some reason. It just, to me, doesn't make sense that when we look at places that have really tried to go after the commercial folks, regardless of the type of housing they're putting people in, whether it's a large hotel or some set of vacation cottages, they have had to get way more sophisticated. They've had to look at the ownership group and decide where it's based. Colorado is doing this at the county level. But for us to just say owner occupied or not, I don't think that's still particularly fair or progressive when you think about the literal cottage industries that have developed in the state in towns that don't have a hotel.
Short-term rentals do play an economic function in a state that is heavily dependent on tourism. We need to put the tourists somewhere. If we take short-term rentals off the market, we're either gonna lose that business or we're going to have to build more hotels or motels, which are not always that pretty. And so we need to find a balance. I really don't have a problem. We've rented out rooms in this state during foliage season since I moved here over 50 years ago. Because people came here and found out there were hotels on every corner and you couldn't get a room, and the Chamber of Commerce would put out an emergency bulletin for anyone that would take in a tourist overnight. And it was free. Sometimes you got left a bottle of wine, but that was about it. We don't have room for all the tourists that want to come here, and short-term rentals have filled in some of that, and it's helped people, but we have companies that are buying large swaths of property. And, you know, right now, we're trying to find a way to help people afford their school budget this year.
The richer people will call them ski condos, and they won't get taxed for these huge pieces of the commercial investment. I mean, really, we have the lowest commercial investment in short-term rentals in the country. It's about 3%. We're getting better data on the level of Vermonters who have a one or two units either in their home or on their contiguous property, that kind of thing. It's very high. Many people rent out their own home.
I'll live in a tent in the backyard.
Right, and that's how they pay their property. So I'm not trying to like get on a soapbox, but we will not be hitting wealthy people and wealthy enclaves for tourists. Those will be ancillary hotel ski condos. And we will be hitting people who just put their second little property on their contiguous property on Airbnb.
Okay, I think we can say that short-term rentals come in all shapes and sizes. I don't think anyone wants to tax the widow that rents out her back bedroom to pay her property taxes. This year, she may have to rent out her bedroom and sleep on the couch. But I think, you know, that's where the bill that's come to us is going for a surcharge. They're doing a surcharge on rooms and meals. They're hitting everybody.
No,
They're not hitting everybody.
You still-
Yeah, they're not, they're just hitting. However they define short term.
They're not
It's not
hitting smugs, they're not hitting the resorts. They are hitting individual homes, sometimes only by a person living in that home full time, sometimes by people who live in it part-time and rent it part-time. It's a whole mixed bag. And if we tax, as the former chair of Ways and Means used to say, unfortunately, the minute you try and make something fair, you make it complicated. And that's especially true in taxation, and then it gets difficult to understand and interpret, and there was a time when we started enforcing that we had group after group after group. It took about 2 years of people who were hit with tax bills. We don't know if any of them ever paid them, who thought they were doing the right thing because the law we wrote wasn't clear. And I won't do any tax based on use, because that calls for a judgment by the person paying the tax or owing it. We got into a lot of trouble with, if you're using it for your roses, it's taxable. If you're using it for your string beans, it's not. And people were hit with like $300,000 bills in back taxes. So we need, if we try and carve this out and say, we're only gonna do this group, it will get complicated.
Something the commission would work on.
I don't know that the commission is anywhere in here charged with looking for revenue sources. I don't know that they're looking at the cause. I see nothing in here that asks them to look at the cause of the high cost and our high pupil costs. This, to me, will be a nice, feel-good study. I would like, if we're going to do that, to make it much more focused and direct, so that we come out with a very clear definition of what the problem is and a very clear definition of the recommended solution. And that's a proposal with cost. Wow. Okay. That's where we are. Right.
Just given our time
Yeah.
frame. Do you, if we have thought, really along the lines of what you're saying, I mean, if we look at where costs are rising, it's probably human services issues, deferred maintenance, so now. We could look at regional bonding for shared facilities, et cetera. Do you want us to work on language or?
Before we work on language, I think we need to come to some conclusion sometime. Any committee members agree to get something drafted. Certainly don't let me forget to have me present the amendment you have prepared, not to this bill, to the telecom bill.
To approach, so we have to do that.
I know we don't, but he's got one, he's gonna
Zach
present it.
has got copies.
Okay,
Shit.
cause I want you.
See, sorry.
Yeah.
We went to approach, so we have another day.
We don't have it. He's gonna make a floor amendment and this committee can stand up and say if we support it or don't support it. I think it's 3 words. So 2 of which is for the purpose. Must be 4. Okay. You don't have any, yeah, no silver bullets.
I guess, no.
So this.
I think it depends on what you're,
Okay,
what you're.
so we can do 2-cent reduction with the cloud tax. Is it 10 million per penny?
Yes.
A little bit, yeah, roundabout.
Okay, so 600,000. Dropped in the bucket.
Sitting in earlier this afternoon, said there were 3 parts to the cloud tax, and we ought to do it. You would say, maybe repeat yourself better than I could.
We're having testimony tomorrow, I understand, and I'm hoping that will illustrate a lot of these pieces, but there's software as a service, which is, I think, what we're always thinking of, and then there's platform as a service and infrastructure as a service, and other states have clearly disambiguated, and they tax software and pass and not yes, and so on. I think it's worth having a
We
conversation.
definitely will have that conversation.
Reduce our revenue by about 5 million,
And
if we
if-
just carved out.
Kirby, if you can find out what some of these other states do, so we can see an example. And what they tax, in cloud tax,
Okay.
you'll have to have it by tomorrow.
I have been working with Kirby on this, and
Okay.
so I do have some language that would actually carve out on those 3 dimensions, but would, which my
Right.
understanding would cost less, and so I have gone back and forth with Ted. Being would reduce less, where if the software is an input into the product, so if you buy software as a cloud or a software product you sell, then it sort of tracks with that machine inputs. And that'd be a smaller amount, and
Okay.
similarly, if you sell any physical products that have a software component that you pay for. I always go to OnLogic, they're in my district, and I don't even know if this would help them. But if they sell Internet of Things device and they pay for software that's part of that product, then that would be a business input and it would be exempt.
Okay.
And so I think
Will-
my understanding would be less than the 5 million as a reduction, but I think it would be consistent with other sales tax.
Okay, so because mostly, yes. Product. Input, raw material. So we will look at that, but anything we reduce, we need to be thinking about a way. And I would like to do that, but that's that much less help we're giving to people with their 15% rounded property tax increase this year. Even if we can get it back to 5 and 6% next year, it's still building on a huge base. And we've got to find a way to get that base down. Because apparently we can't get postal workers either. I know we can't get teachers. We can't get nurses. I know National Life has people all choose to go to Texas. They have lots of houses in Texas, no electricity and lots of tornadoes. But,
And as Matt shares, our incomes in this country get farther and farther apart. Those problems are gonna grow.
and I will, if anyone has suggestions on how we can fix income inequality in this bill, I'm open to them.
Pathways to homeownership, because that builds actual wealth and stability.
So that is,
So just one of my concerns about the whole bill. It goes to this issue of cost and what the future should look like. And one of the things we've said over and over again for years is you can't do education funding in a vacuum, which is exactly what this does. And as a result, it's going to fail. We all know it. You've got to do what essentially was the charge of the Blue Ribbon Tax Commission. How many years ago? It was 2010 and 2011, as I recall.
yeah,
Or thereabouts.
long time ago.
And that was incomplete, and the next administration came up, decided not to do this piece. We then fast forwarded to the commission that was done, 18, 19 thereabouts, and that was a
2
disappointment at
years
best.
ago, we did the study.
Yeah, and that was an utter disappointment,
It was,
didn't solve our problems. And we still have it, and this again is another one of those things that's gone on for years and years and years, we haven't addressed, and we're never gonna fix education funding unless we understand and plan for how it's going to operate with and affect other taxes and other taxpayers.
and it's not just taxes.
It's not just taxes, I
We're
agree.
looking at
Yeah.
the interest rates are up. But the cost of food is up.
Mhm.
The cost of fuel is up. I believe we just added a bill that will put an additional $3 a month on your electric bill. That's on top of whatever their normal thing is. We just passed a bill that could put another 5 or 6%, if we're lucky, only that, on top of your health insurance bill. The health insurance for most people went up about 15% this year. Our wages went up during COVID. We've made good wages, but they are not keeping up with taxes and inflation. And that may be a reason, Senator, that Vermonters can't afford houses, because we are known as a low wage state. I don't know that it's the fault of anyone from out of state that they have more money than we do if our wages are low. I noticed.
But our wages in education are not necessarily low compared to other states.
Oh, they are.
They're in the upper range of wages, at least in education.
That's not what I've heard, so
Well, I was looking here
Low
today.
we'll
wage,
find that out.
it's a low wage state. Our workers are not able to buy houses in the state, and they're competing with people from outside the state.
Yep.
Who outbid them.
They
So-
cannot afford to buy the cost of building a basic house.
They can
They,
buy one that's already built and exists there.
but the people you pointed out must live here now. I mean, yeah, they live here. And we need more housing, we're working on that. We need another GI Bill nationally, but I'm not holding my breath to that.
Even GIs don't get cheap.
Not anymore. So anyway, tomorrow we'll ask principals all the associations to come in. Got Julia. We'll see if Representative Kornheiser can come down and tell us what she's thinking. I will have, if we're gonna have time tomorrow, I'll have Vida and the auditor come in on H10. But I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. We've got to get this bill out. You might tomorrow want to work on rewording that first study committee and think about what you would like to have in that. And work on that so we can see where it goes, okay? And we'll see, because I think that's the main point of this. We've got some around the edges trying to raise some money. Other than the cloud tax, there's no significant money being raised. What's 600,000? But it's not a tenth of a penny. I mean,
And there are no significant cost reductions anywhere. In fact, there are no cost reductions that I can see anywhere.
I want to say something on that if I could, and this is important because I'm getting emails from how can we support a bill that raises taxes 15%? The current system, for what it is, we can't reach into school budgets and cut spending. We don't have that authority. These are school budgets approved. I'm not blaming, I'm not pointing the finger.
Nope.
I'm saying the system as it is, we
Doesn't
don't have the
allow us to
authority
fix it.
to do that. So all we can do is really find other non-property tax revenues. I hear your point though, but that's my problem with the challenge with Vermont funding
But
system.
that also is the problem of the vision to fix it.
Okay.
And there's nothing here that fixes it, or even purports to.
That I can agree with.
I don't think local schools are on a spending spree. I think that they are trying to do the best that they can for their students. I have no doubt that the problem is we're paying a teacher to teach less than 10 kids in a grade. And that we're administrators for those kids. We're paying for behavioral interventionists and guidance counselors. And we could deliver that service much more efficiently and use the money we save so that every kid gets introduced to computer programming with Legos, and robotics, and has a chance in advanced math, so that if they do get a green and gold scholarship, they have the classes they need to get in to college. And not all of our schools, some of our schools that have larger class sizes, like 30 or 40 kids in a grade. I remember when I had 30 kids in my class, I think 36. But that was the day of rule. That their taxes are going up way more than their budgets because other budgets are going up. So there's an inequity in the equal. So I think that's what we've got to think about tonight. And we will start tomorrow trying, I think, first to rework that study to make it more focused on the issue. And I don't know, $600,000 doesn't seem worth the time to raise the tax or the annoyance. Yeah, I wanna raise a lot million. I'd like to be able to. Are we still at something like 200 million to buy down the taxes to
yeah.
less than 10, or was it only 800, yeah, but only 100 million now?
So it does depend on the construct that you are looking at and what you're trying to do. I do want to clarify the short-term rental surcharge is projected to raise 6.5 million.
Oh, 6.5, okay.
Oh, I didn't know it was 600,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just for
Okay,
clarity.
okay.
Something else I thought was 6, all right, 6.
There's a lot of
It's
numbers
still not a
swirling around.
penny. It's not a penny.
So with respect to how much I would need to come back in terms of modeling because it depends on the kind of construct. Like if the committee is interested in maintaining the property tax credit increase of 15%, that is a cost, of course. If you were to not have the property tax credit increase, but you were to include cloud and short-term rental, you could do an average bill increase of 10%, that would be 60 million.
60.
60.
Oh, that's better than 280. Cause we only need to raise $60 million to get us down to a 10% increase.
And if I may, just one piece, if you were to want to have the property tax credit, as we have walked through that bump, that would be more than 60 million required, that would be an additional 27.
Okay, so if we don't wanna raise taxes on non-homestead, to buy down the bump. Because property, the income sensitivity won't reflect this year's bump. We would have to raise 27 million.
So that property tax credit bump, it's about 7 million,
Okay,
23.7 million.
okay, it's 20 million taken,
The-
20 million,
And that's being raised on non-homestead.
right,
The challenge of raising that on both homestead and non-homestead is you have people who pay part of their property tax on property and part on income. So if you were to be raising the money, at least in part, to cover that bump in property tax credit, you may be
somebody twice.
someone might have a higher bill and a higher property tax credit. And their higher bill is to cover their property tax credit, but the increase in the property tax credit is not making up the increase in their property tax bill. So because those two work together, there's a challenge there.
Can we just put a poll tax on everyone in the state? Everybody pays $10. How many million people do we have?
That's only six million.
It's only 6 million.
6%.
Or 60,
If you
yeah,
put $1,000 person tax, how that might work.
that might work. Okay,
Was there any number ever calculated as to what the impact would be in the event that we did not execute Act 127?
No, the reason is, I don't know how budgets would be different.
Mhm.
If Act 127 were to not have passed, so there's no way for me
Calculate.
to calculate that. I think that information would need to come from folks on the ground.
And there was no estimate in 127 as to what the implementation of it would cost, or was there?
No, there was no estimate
No.
for that reason as well. At least at JFO, we can't predict how school boards will be building
Yeah,
budgets in accordance with.
okay,
I just wanna ask her modeling. But
Okay.
has the committee's indulgence, I mean, I would only be willing to consider a short-term rental tax if it was simply a non-punitive tax on the whole rooms tax as an increase. So it might be helpful, at least for me, but if people reject it, I'm okay with
I'm
that.
sorry, what you mean by the whole rooms, you mean?
Like 0.5% on the whole rooms tax
Hotels too.
instead of just these people pay 1.5%. I just like to see what that
Overall,
looks like.
hotels and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, being fair to the category instead of punitive to one segment of the category.
that might work.
I just wanna see it, and I don't
Yeah.
care if
That
people say no.
It would be helpful. I mean, if,
Yeah,
I'll need to work with my colleague Ted. He's really the expert when it comes to meals and rooms and other consumption taxes. But to clarify, you're interested in understanding an increase of 0.5% solely on rooms or meals and rooms,
rooms,
just rooms.
and that would be applied to.
all rooms, or I'm assuming you're doing just short-term rentals, all short-term rentals?
Just all rooms.
So this is hotels too, she's talking.
Yeah,
Right.
those are short-term rentals.
Yes, yes,
Okay, you've got some residency hotels. I don't know
yeah.
if we have them here, but they have them.
No, that's what I'm saying. You get the whole category without saying you're a
Yeah,
short-term rental,
the
you're
whole
not.
short-term rental category.
But residency hotels, I'm not sure exactly.
There's some
What are-
hotels where you pretty much, if you're a short-term nurse and you can stay there for a month, some of them categorize themselves.
Any stay under 30 days.
So Kirby Kingdom City Council, it sounds what you're saying is the rooms tax base.
Yeah.
Because anything that's a long occupancy would not be subject to rooms tax.
Okay,
Right.
so,
30 days, is it or longer? Is that how it works? I
Yeah,
think that's what it is.
14 per year. Yeah. And 30 days at a time is long term.
Well, 14
we'll
consecutive.
try.
I don't even want to pick.
Okay.
No,
We
it's
should look at the definition of
it's-
short.
in order, yeah.
Just taxes.
I'm not against that modeling. I love getting those ideas. I will say this, the short-term rental tax is attractive to me as a rational assessment because I feel like the housing shortage is what is driving up property taxes because people are paying more for houses because there's less supply. So if those people, like you described, companies buying up houses and selling them as Airbnbs, if that's taking house roofs off the market, then that's driving up prices and it's rational to me to just tax that. But I'm not opposed to looking at an overall rooms tax and stuff.
It might be able to make it less.
Right.
It might be able to raise more. And dedicate it all.
And we're just not
We'll
building
get
more
pushback
houses.
from across the hall about dedicating all of it.
Sure.
If we raise enough. But,
Good geographically centered.
and we could do it we could do it as a short-term surcharge. Because surcharges usually are short-term.
Sunset.
With a sunset, so that we use it to get over this bump. But as of X date, we're going back to the 1/4, or it goes away, the tax goes away. But it might, depending on what it raises, it might give us the cushion to get where we wanna be with that vetting. And depending on how we write this task force, blue ribbon, whatever it is, their charge. The idea would be that in 3 years, we will have a solution. I have a feeling it will take a number of years to phase the solution in. As education isn't generally subject to very quick changes. need some phase in. But if you, depending on how much you tell us we can raise with that, I think we're looking for 80 million.
So I will just share, I can share my screen again, but, the meals and rooms tax, 1/4 of that is dedicated to the education fund.
Right.
And so that's projected to bring in 61.5 million. The
Meals
total
and room.
Meals and rooms.
I think that's why I'm asking just for a little bit of modeling on half or 1% on room to understand.
Yes, so I'll talk with Ted about that, but just for context,
Yeah.
in terms of the overall picture that we're looking at.
Yeah,
Taking out the.
I don't know that we're ready to go to meals yet. Because that's not just tourists. But we tried that once when we were looking for water, tap money for the Clean Water Fund. We tried going for rooms and meals, thinking tourists come here and stay in hotels because we have nice clean water. And now we have algae blooms. It didn't go over well, but nobody is ever happy with these cats. When we was first looking at local options, I started reading my bill when I stayed in a short-term rental. And it's amazing what kinds of taxes get tacked on there. A stadium construction taxes. I never had a bill that was the quoted rate per your room. There were all kinds of fees, and the bigger the city, the more the fees. So, yeah, education, 15% increase. We're gonna have people are not gonna. So I'll make first one painful, but. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Just about it. Move the home, go right. Okay. We shall see what we shall see. But you're done.